Hey story enthusiasts! This is Harris bringing you another gem. In this video, we present to you what if Harry was kidnapped by Grindelwald's followers and trained as the next Dark Lord. If you enjoy these stories as much as we enjoy sharing them, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Let's dive in. Chapter 1, The Making of a Dark Heir. The night air on Privet Drive crackled with magic. 3 figures in dark cloaks materialized at the street corner, their movements quick and purposeful. The tallest of them, a woman with sharp features and penetrating blue eyes, raised her wand and extinguished the street lights with practiced efficiency. Number 4, she whispered, her voice carrying a faint Germanic accent. The Order's protection is minimal tonight. Dumbledore's overconfidence will be his undoing. Katharina Strauss had spent months planning this moment. While Voldemort's followers scattered or faced imprisonment, she and her companions remained loyal to a different vision, Gellert Grindelwald's revolution. The Dark Lord's defeat had merely created an opportunity, one she wouldn't waste. The Blood Wards, Katharina, asked a stocky wizard to her right, nervously fingering his wand. Already compromised, she replied with cool satisfaction. I've been siphoning their power for weeks. The Dursleys themselves provided the breach, their resentment of the boy weakened the protection. The third figure, tall and gaunt, stepped forward. Then let's not waste time with conversation. His wand sliced through the air, and the front door of number 4 swung open silently. Inside, the Dursley home stood quiet and ordinary, painfully, boringly Muggle. Katharina's lip curled in distaste as she navigated around overstuffed furniture. They moved with practiced stealth up the stairs, following the faint magical signature that pulsed like a beacon to those who knew how to sense it. The cupboard under the stairs emanated that energy. Katharina paused, momentarily confused, then fury spread across her face as she realized where the Muggles kept the child. With a flick of her wand, the cupboard door unlocked. Inside, a small boy with unruly black hair slept fitfully on a thin mattress. A lightning bolt scar stood out vividly on his forehead. The great savior of the wizarding world, Katharina whispered, kept like unwanted luggage. She reached down and gently lifted the sleeping child. Come, Harry Potter. You deserve a greater destiny than this. The boy stirred but didn't wake as she wrapped him in her cloak. Minutes later, they vanished into the night, leaving only a faint magical residue that would confound investigators for years to come. By the time Dumbledore's alarms finally triggered, they were already crossing the channel, and by dawn, the Swiss Alps rose around them, offering sanctuary and secrecy. Harry Potter was gone. Henrik Strauss was about to be born. Again. Katharina demanded, her voice echoing through the stone chamber. 6-year-old Harry, now called Henrik, stood panting in the center of a training circle, sweat plastering his black hair to his forehead despite the alpine chill. His small hand gripped a training wand so tightly his knuckles showed white. I can't, he gasped. I've been trying for hours. You can and you will, Katharina replied, her tone brooking no argument. The shield charm is fundamental. Without it, you're vulnerable. Vulnerable means dead. Harry squared his thin shoulders. 3 years under Katharina's tutelage had taught him that complaints only extended lessons. He raised his wand again. Protego. A faint shimmer appeared before him, barely visible, but there. Katharina nodded once, then cast a stinging hex directly at it. The shield collapsed immediately, and Harry winced as the hex caught him across the arm. Better, she conceded, but not good enough. Your enemies won't throw stinging hexes, Henrik. They'll use curses that stop your heart or boil your blood. I'm tired, Harry said, a rare hint of defiance in his green eyes. And hungry. Something flickered across Katharina's face, not quite softness, but perhaps recognition. 5 more attempts. Show me improvement, and we'll break for lunch. This was her method, pushing to the edge but never beyond breaking. Unlike the other Grindelwald loyalists who saw the boy purely as a weapon, Katharina understood that weapons required maintenance. Over the years, she'd developed a complicated relationship with her charge, part mentor, part jailer, part surrogate mother. The fortress they called home perched on an unplottable peak in the Alps, formerly one of Grindelwald's lesser-known strongholds. 7 loyalists lived there permanently, each contributing to Harry's education according to their expertise. Most days followed the same rigid schedule: physical training at dawn, magical theory throughout the morning, practical application after lunch, history and ideology in the evening. By the 5th attempt, Harry managed to hold his shield against 3 consecutive stinging hexes. Katerina nodded curtly. Acceptable. Go eat. Harry turned to leave, then hesitated. Will you tell me more about him today? About Grindelwald? A rare smile touched Katerina's lips. After dinner. You've earned it. In the kitchen, Rolf, the fortress's resident potions master, ladled thick soup into a bowl for Harry. Shields today? He asked, noting the red marks on the boy's arms. Yeah. Got up to 3 hexes. Not bad for a runt, Rolf said, his gruff tone belied by the extra chunk of bread he slipped onto Harry's plate. Of all the adults in the fortress, Rolf came closest to treating Harry like a child rather than a project. Harry wolfed down his food, his mind already racing ahead to the evening. Stories about Grindelwald were his favorite reward, tales of the revolutionary wizard who had nearly liberated magical kind from hiding. The adults spoke of him with reverence, describing a visionary who understood that wizard dominance was, for the greater good, of the world. What they never mentioned was Voldemort, at least not directly. Harry knew only that there had been another Dark Lord, one who had killed his birth parents. Someone twisted and power-hungry who had corrupted Grindelwald's noble vision. Someone Harry would eventually replace with a purer ideology. After lunch came Transfiguration with Marcus, a scholarly wizard with wire-rimmed glasses who had once taught at Durmstrang. Unlike Katerina's combat training, these lessons required precision rather than power. Focus, Henrik, Marcus instructed as Harry attempted to transform a matchstick into a needle. Visualization is everything. See the metal forming, the eye opening, the point sharpening. By the end of the session, Harry had successfully transfigured 3 matchsticks. Marcus noted his progress in a leather-bound journal he kept of Harry's development, one of many such records the group maintained meticulously. Your progress exceeds expectations, Marcus commented. By the time you reach Hogwarts age, you'll be years ahead of your peers. Hogwarts? Harry perked up at the unfamiliar word. Marcus looked uncomfortable, realizing his slip. A school. One you may need to know about someday. But that's for Katerina to explain. That evening, after a dinner of roasted meat and vegetables grown in the fortress's magical greenhouse, Katerina led Harry to the library. This vast room housed thousands of books, many rare or forbidden elsewhere, salvaged from Grindelwald's collections after his defeat. Katerina settled into a high-backed chair and motioned Harry to sit at her feet. From a hidden compartment in her robes, she withdrew a small, triangular object that caught the firelight. Do you know what this is? She asked. Harry shook his head, entranced by the strange symbol. This is the sign of the Deathly Hallows, Grindelwald's mark, though its origins are much older. It represents power beyond ordinary magic. She traced the triangle with her finger. Grindelwald understood that wizards need not hide. Our powers aren't something shameful but a gift to be used for the betterment of all. Like how? Harry asked, leaning forward eagerly. Imagine a world without war because wizards maintained order. No famine because we could multiply food. No disease because magical healing reached everyone. Her blue eyes gleamed in the firelight. But narrow-minded wizards feared change, feared stepping into the light. They preferred cowering in shadows while muggles destroyed each other and the world around them. Harry absorbed these words like a sponge. At 6, the ideology seemed simple and compelling. Why hide something good? What happened to him? To Grindelwald? Katerina's expression darkened. He was betrayed and imprisoned. Albus Dumbledore, once his closest friend, turned against him out of jealousy and fear. Dumbledore, Harry repeated, testing the name that was always spoken with contempt in the fortress. The same one who left me with those muggles. Yes, Katerina confirmed. The same one who thought it appropriate to leave a magical child in a cupboard. She didn't need to embellish this truth, the reality was damning enough. Will I meet him someday? Harry asked. Katerina studied him for a long moment before responding. Yes, Henrik. But when you do, you'll be prepared. By 8, Harry could duel against adult opponents. Not win, not yet, but last several minutes against wizards holding back only slightly. His reflexes had become lightning quick, his magical reserves unusually deep for his age. Katerina's training regimen had honed him into something extraordinary. Again, she commanded after disarming him for the third time that morning. Harry retrieved his wand without complaint. These sessions had become his favorite despite their difficulty. In dueling, he found freedom, choices, creativity, the rush of power flowing through him. He settled into a combat stance, eyes narrowed in concentration. This time, he opened aggressively, casting 3 hexes in rapid succession, forcing Katerina to defend rather than attack. She smiled tightly, parrying each one before countering with a disarming charm. Harry sidestepped rather than shielding, letting the spell pass harmlessly by. Good, she acknowledged. Conservation of energy. Never block what you can avoid. For nearly 10 minutes, they danced across the training room, spells flashing between them. Harry incorporated everything he'd learned, changing levels, using the environment, varying his timing. When Katerina finally disarmed him with a complex feint, she was breathing hard. Your progress is remarkable, she said, summoning water for them both. You've mastered spells most third years struggle with. Harry drank deeply, pride warming him from within. When do I learn the unforgivables? The question hung in the air. The darker curses had been referenced but not yet taught, a line Katerina hadn't crossed. Soon, she replied carefully. But power without strategy is worthless. That's tomorrow's lesson, magical theory with Adalbert. Adalbert Rothstein was the oldest of the Grindelwald loyalists, a stooped figure with wispy white hair and the sharpest mind in the fortress. His specialties were magical theory and history, subjects that required long hours in the library poring over ancient texts. The following day, Harry sat across from Adalbert as the old wizard drew complex diagrams representing magical flow. Most wizards never understand what they're doing, Adalbert explained, his quill scratching across parchment. They learn incantations and wand movements by rote, never grasping the underlying principles. Harry watched, fascinated, as the diagram took shape, lines of force connecting different magical disciplines. That's why the Ministry classifies spells as dark or light, a meaningless distinction that serves only to control. Magic is intent and power, nothing more. Adalbert tapped a section of the diagram. The killing curse requires hate, yes, but so does offensive magic of any kind. The difference is merely degree. These theoretical sessions expanded Harry's understanding beyond practical application. He learned about magical resonance, sympathetic connections, the influence of astronomical alignments. Knowledge forbidden at conventional schools flowed freely here, each lesson building toward a comprehensive magical education no ordinary child could access. Why doesn't everyone learn this way? Harry asked once. Adalbert smiled thinly. Because knowledge is power, and those in authority fear what they cannot control. Remember that, young Henrik. Information withheld is the first chain of oppression. At 9, Harry experienced his first real taste of power, and the consequences of losing control. It happened during a rare trip to the village below their mountain. Heavily disguised and under Katerina's watchful eye, these excursions served as both reward and practical experience, opportunities to observe ordinary wizards and practice blending in. The small wizarding settlement of Steinholz existed primarily for those who preferred isolation. Its residents asked few questions and minded their own business, making it ideal for their purposes. Harry loved these trips, the different foods, the snippets of normal conversation, the children he sometimes glimpsed playing freely. That day, they visited the local apothecary for rare ingredients. While Katerina negotiated with the shopkeeper, Harry browsed nearby shelves, examining curious specimens in glass jars. A group of local boys entered, older teenagers who immediately noticed the strange, serious child. "Hey, little mouse," one called in German, "lost your way from the cheese." Harry ignored them, having been trained extensively in maintaining cover. But the boys, bored and looking for entertainment, persisted. "What's wrong? Can't understand German? Or just stupid?" The tallest boy knocked a jar from Harry's hand. It shattered, releasing a foul smell. The shopkeeper shouted in alarm, and Katerina turned, her eyes narrowing dangerously. But before she could intervene, something happened. Harry felt it building inside him, a pressure, a heat, a gathering storm. His carefully controlled magic responded not to wand or incantation but to pure emotion. The air around him crackled with energy. "I understand perfectly," he replied in flawless German. "I just don't waste words on trash." The leader reached for Harry, a mistake. The moment his fingers touched Harry's shoulder, a shock wave of magic erupted outward. Glass jars exploded throughout the shop. The boys were thrown backward, crashing into shelves. The leader took the worst of it, his skin erupting in painful boils where he'd touched Harry. Katerina moved with astonishing speed. A series of memory charms flew from her wand, targeting the shopkeeper and each boy. Then she grabbed Harry's arm, her fingers digging painfully into his flesh, and disapparated directly from the shop, a dangerous maneuver that spoke to her desperation. Back at the fortress, her fury was cold and terrifying. "Reckless. Undisciplined. You jeopardized everything with that display," she hissed, pacing before him in the main hall. "Years of planning at risk because you couldn't control your temper." Harry stood rigid, face impassive despite his inner turmoil. "They started it. They deserved it." Katerina stopped pacing and stared at him. "Deserved? You think this is about justice? About who deserves what?" She laughed without humor. "This is about survival and strategy. You exposed yourself. Made yourself memorable. Created witnesses. You erased their memories," Harry countered. "Memory charms can be broken," she snapped. "Patterns can be traced. We survived through perfect anonymity, not childish displays of power." The punishment was severe, 2 weeks confined to the fortress's lowest level, practicing occlumency and emotion-controlling spells for 14 hours each day. By the end, Harry could suppress any emotional reaction under almost any provocation. Yet privately, Katerina recorded the incident with clinical precision in her journal, noting the impressive magical output and instinctive defense. The boy had shown extraordinary power. The task now was to harness it properly. On his 10th birthday, Harry received his first full briefing on the mission ahead. The fortress's council chamber had been rarely used during his childhood, a circular stone room dominated by a massive table carved with runic symbols. Now, all 7 of Grindelwald's loyalists gathered there, with Harry seated at what felt symbolically like a place of judgment. Katerina stood at the head of the table, her normally severe appearance even more formal in ceremonial robes of midnight blue. Behind her, a magical projection showed a familiar castle. "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry," she announced. "The center of British magical education and Albus Dumbledore's seat of power. In 1 year, you will infiltrate it." Harry studied the projection with intense interest. "As Henrik Strauss?" "Yes. We've constructed your identity meticulously, the homeschooled son of a reclusive German witch, recently relocated to Britain following his mother's research interests. Every document exists, every background check will confirm it." Marcus took over, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Your academic preparation exceeds OWL level in most subjects, though you'll need to carefully moderate your performance. Too perfect raises questions, just as too flawed creates unwanted attention. Your primary objective is information gathering, continued Adalbert. Dumbledore has accumulated secrets and power for decades. You will be our eyes and ears within his domain. And the secondary objective? Harry asked, already knowing there was more. Katerina's expression hardened. Assessment of the current Death Eater situation. Voldemort's followers remain in positions of influence throughout British wizarding society. You will map these connections without engaging them. Harry processed this information with the analytical mind they'd helped develop. You believe Voldemort isn't truly gone. The room fell silent. This was the first time Harry had spoken the name directly, crossing the unstated boundary they'd maintained for years. No, Katerina finally admitted. We believe he found methods to anchor himself to this world. Methods Grindelwald would have considered abhorrent despite their utility. Horcruxes, said Rolf bluntly, ignoring warning looks from the others. Soul fragments hidden in objects. Obscene magic. Harry's mind raced, connecting pieces of information gleaned over years. You think he'll return? And you want me to, what? Fight him? Eventually replace him, Katerina corrected. The wizarding world will always have dark lords, Henrik. Power abhors a vacuum. When he returns, there will be those who flock to his banner out of fear or ambition. They must have an alternative, a leader who embodies Grindelwald's true vision rather than Voldemort's mindless destruction. The full scope of their plan finally crystallized in Harry's mind. They hadn't rescued him out of compassion but calculation. The boy who lived, remade into Grindelwald's heir, the perfect symbol to rally around. Strangely, the revelation didn't anger him. After a childhood steeped in their ideology, the plan seemed logical, even inspiring. To become not just powerful but significant, to reshape the world rather than hide from it. I'll need to know everything, he said finally. About my parents. About what happened that night. About why I survived. Katerina nodded approvingly. And you shall. It's time you understood precisely who you are, Harry Potter, and the power that resides in that lightning bolt scar. The final year of preparation was the most intense. Harry's training shifted from pure magical education to the subtle arts of infiltration and intelligence gathering. He studied British wizarding customs, practiced varying his magical signature to appear less exceptional, and mastered the social skills he'd had little opportunity to develop in isolation. Your accent is still detectable, noted Katerina during a mock conversation. The R sounds remain too harsh. Harry adjusted immediately, softening the consonant. Better to acknowledge it than deny it. A slight German accent fits my cover story and explains any cultural missteps. Clever, she conceded. But remember that children at Hogwarts come from throughout Britain, with regional accents and customs of their own. Observe before adapting. Beyond practical skills, this final year brought the promised revelations about his past. Harry learned the full story of Lord Voldemort, the prophecy that had marked him, and the sacrifice of his parents. He studied photographs of Lily and James Potter, searching their faces for connections to himself. She had your eyes, Katerina noted once, studying a rare photo of Lily Potter. And perhaps her magical intuition passed to you as well. Harry felt oddly detached from these people who died protecting him. They existed as historical figures rather than parents, important to his story but disconnected from his identity as Henrik Strauss. Still, he found himself returning to their images, particularly his mother's, during private moments. The final preparation involved creating a wand that would mask his true capabilities. His training wand, unrestricted and unregistered, had served him well, but Hogwarts students required officially tracked wands from recognized makers. Ollivander would recognize your magical signature immediately, explained Rolf as he guided Harry through the process of crafting a secondary wand. This will register as your primary magical focus while concealing your true potential. The work was painstaking, selecting wood that harmonized with but didn't perfectly match his magic, incorporating a core that would function adequately without drawing his full power. The resulting wand felt awkward in Harry's hand, like writing with his non-dominant side, but would pass any inspection. His real wand, 11 inches of blackthorn with a dual core of phoenix feather and thestral hair, would remain hidden, used only when absolute privacy could be assured. On the eve of his departure, Harry stood at the fortress's highest tower, looking out over the moonlit Alps. Katerina joined him there, her presence unusually quiet. Having doubts, she asked after several minutes of silence. Assessing variables, Harry corrected. Hogwarts contains unknown factors we cannot predict. That's why we've trained you in adaptation rather than rigid response. She turned to study his profile, so much older than his 11 years in expression and bearing. You've become more than we dared hope, Henrik. Harry, he corrected automatically. I need to start thinking of myself that way again. No. Katerina's voice sharpened. You were Harry Potter, an infant with potential. You are Henrik Strauss, our creation, our weapon, our future. Her hand gripped his shoulder. Never forget what they did to you. Dumbledore left you with those muggles who treated you like garbage. The wizarding world moved on while you suffered. They don't deserve Harry Potter's loyalty. Harry nodded, the familiar anger rekindling. This was the emotional core they'd carefully nurtured, not wild rage but cold, focused resentment. A drive to prove himself, to surpass those who had failed him, to create a world where such betrayals couldn't happen. Tomorrow you enter enemy territory, Katerina continued. You'll be surrounded by those who would control or destroy you if they knew your true nature. Trust no one completely. Not even my Hogwarts house? Harry asked, having studied the school's sorting system extensively. Katerina's lips curled slightly. Especially not your house. Whichever it may be, it comes with expectations and limitations. You transcend their categories, Henrik. The next morning, Harry stood on platform 9 3/4, trunk packed with carefully selected books, equipment, and hidden compartments for secure communication. His appearance had been subtly altered, hair lightened to dark brown, scar concealed beneath both magical and muggle cosmetics, eyes charmed to appear more hazel than their natural vivid green. Katerina, disguised as his mother with similar coloring, adjusted his plain black robes one last time. Remember everything, she murmured. Watch. Listen. Learn. Become indispensable without becoming conspicuous. Harry nodded once. I won't fail. See that you don't. Her hand briefly touched his cheek, the closest thing to maternal affection she typically displayed. The future depends on it. As the Hogwarts Express pulled away from the station, Harry sat alone in a compartment, mentally reviewing his objectives. He would infiltrate successfully. He would gather intelligence on Dumbledore and the remaining Death Eaters. He would position himself perfectly for the coming conflict. What he didn't anticipate was how Hogwarts itself would change him, how friendship, connection, and truth would challenge everything he thought he knew. Through the window, London disappeared behind him. Ahead lay Hogwarts, Dumbledore, and his destiny, whatever that might truly be. Chapter 2, Behind enemy lines. Henrik Strauss, formerly Harry Potter, stood perfectly still as chaos swirled around him on the Hogwarts Express. Students shouted greetings, owls screeched, trunks banged against compartment doors. He observed everything with calculated detachment, mentally cataloging potential allies, threats, and information sources. Excuse me, is this seat taken? A girl with bushy brown hair and rather prominent front teeth stood in the doorway of his compartment. Henrik assessed her in seconds, first year, Muggle-born based on her carefully pressed uniform and slight uncertainty, intelligence evident in her eyes. No, he replied, gesturing to the empty bench across from him. Please. I'm Hermione Granger, she said, extending her hand with formal politeness. Henrik Strauss. He shook her hand firmly but briefly, just enough contact to seem normal without inviting further familiarity. That's an interesting accent. German. Henrik nodded, mentally noting her perceptiveness. My mother and I recently moved to England. She's a magical researcher. How fascinating. What does she research? I've read all our course books already, of course, but there's so much about magical academia that isn't covered in the introductory texts. I'm the first witch in my family, so everything's new. Henrik blinked at the torrent of words. Katerina had warned him about oversharing, but this girl seemed to have no such restraints. It made her simultaneously useful and dangerous as a contact. Primarily magical theory, he answered vaguely. The foundations of spell creation and modification. That sounds incredibly advanced. Hermione's eyes widened with genuine interest. Have you learned much from her? Were you homeschooled before Hogwarts? Yes. Henrik offered a careful smile. Though I'm looking forward to structured education with peers. It can be isolating learning alone. This calculated vulnerability, a truth wrapped in his cover story, had the intended effect. Hermione's expression softened with understanding. I can imagine. I was always a bit isolated at my old school too, always reading when others were playing. Too eager to answer questions in class. She smiled self-consciously. I'm hoping things will be different here, with people who understand magic. Before Henrik could respond, the compartment door slid open again. A round-faced boy looked in, his expression distressed. Sorry to interrupt, but have either of you seen a toad? Mine's gone missing again. No, Henrik replied, already losing interest in this clearly inept potential classmate. I haven't, but we could help you look, Hermione offered, standing up. She turned to Henrik. Would you like to come? It was the first test of his social integration. Declining might mark him as unfriendly, accepting meant wasting time on a pointless search. Henrik weighed the options and stood. I know a spell that might help, he said, calculating that demonstrating modest magical skill would establish his credentials without revealing too much. The boy, who introduced himself as Neville Longbottom, a name Henrik immediately recognized from his briefings on prominent magical families, brightened considerably. Really? That would be brilliant. Henrik drew his secondary wand, feeling its muted connection to his magic. Animalem Revelio, he cast, deliberately using a more obscure variation of the revealing charm that a homeschooled student might reasonably know. The wand tip glowed and pointed down the corridor toward the rear of the train. Amazing! Hermione exclaimed. That's not in the standard book of spells, grade 1. Where did you learn it? My mother, Henrik answered truthfully. She believes in practical education. They followed the spell's direction, eventually locating the toad in the luggage rack of a compartment occupied by several older students. Henrik observed how Hermione handled the interaction, politely assertive, slightly bossy. Useful traits in an ally, though potentially irritating long-term. As they returned to their compartment, Neville clutching his recovered pet, they passed a compartment where a pale, blond boy held court among several attentive listeners. The boy glanced up, his gaze lingering on Henrik with obvious assessment. That would be Draco Malfoy, Henrik recognized from the extensive dossiers he'd memorized. Son of Lucius Malfoy, suspected Death Eater who had claimed Imperius after Voldemort's fall. A potentially valuable connection for intelligence gathering on Voldemort's remaining network. Back in their compartment, Hermione launched into an enthusiastic monologue about Hogwarts houses based on her reading of Hogwarts, a history. Henrik listened attentively, both to maintain his cover as an eager student and to gather additional perspectives on house dynamics beyond his briefing materials. I'm hoping for Gryffindor, she concluded. Headmaster Dumbledore was in Gryffindor, and it sounds by far the best, though Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. Henrik nodded noncommittally. His own research suggested Slytherin would best serve his purposes, proximity to children of Death Eaters, emphasis on ambition and cunning that aligned with his training. But he'd been instructed to let the Sorting Hat decide his placement, as interfering might trigger magical alarms. What about you? Hermione asked. Any preference? I'm open to wherever I might best develop my abilities, Henrik answered diplomatically. Each house has its advantages. The countryside flying past the windows gradually became wilder and darker. When the train finally pulled into Hogsmeade station, Henrik moved with the flow of students, maintaining his cover as an ordinary first year while continuing to observe and catalogue. The giant man calling for first years, Hagrid, from his briefings, led them to a fleet of small boats. Henrik found himself sharing with Hermione, Neville, and a red-headed boy who introduced himself as Ron Weasley. Another name to add to my network map, Henrik thought as they glided across the Black Lake. Then Hogwarts came into view, and despite years of preparation, Henrik felt something unexpected, genuine awe. The castle rose majestically against the night sky, windows blazing with golden light, towers and turrets silhouetted against stars. Magic hummed in the very air around it, ancient and powerful. For a moment, Henrik forgot his mission entirely, simply absorbing the magnificence of the structure that would be both his hunting ground and his home. "It's beautiful," Hermione whispered beside him. "Yes," Henrik agreed, his usual calculation momentarily suspended. "It really is." The great hall exceeded even Henrik's expectations. Thousands of candles floated beneath a ceiling bewitched to show the night sky, illuminating 4 long tables where older students watched the nervous first years file in. At the front of the hall, the high table held the faculty, and at its center, the silver-bearded figure Henrik had studied in countless photographs and briefings. Albus Dumbledore. The man who had left him to suffer with the Dursleys. The greatest obstacle to Grindelwald's vision. Henrik met those twinkling blue eyes for a fraction of a second before looking away, heart pounding despite his occlumency shields. The sorting ceremony began after Professor McGonagall, stern and precise exactly as described in his briefings, brought forward the ancient sorting hat. Henrik listened attentively to its song, noting the descriptions of each house's qualities while mentally preparing himself for the hat's intrusion into his mind. Hermione was sorted into Gryffindor after nearly a minute under the hat. Interesting, Henrik had assessed her as a likely Ravenclaw. Draco Malfoy was immediately declared Slytherin, confirming expectations. When Neville Longbottom also went to Gryffindor, Henrik reassessed his initial dismissal of the boy. The hat's judgment suggested hidden qualities. "Potter, Harry!" McGonagall called, and whispers immediately erupted throughout the hall. Henrik remained motionless, face impassive despite his racing heart. The moment stretched as students craned their necks, looking for the famous boy who lived. McGonagall consulted her list with a frown, then continued to the next name. The whispers intensified. 5 names later, she called, "Strauss, Henrik." Henrik moved forward confidently, settling onto the stool as the ancient hat dropped over his eyes. "Well, well," a small voice whispered in his ear. "What have we here?" "A most unusual mind, and a most unusual deception." Henrik's prepared mental defenses activated immediately, compartmentalizing certain memories while pushing forward his Henrik Strauss identity. "Impressive occlumency for one so young," the hat mused. "But I don't need your memories to see your essence, Mr. Potter. Or do you prefer Strauss now?" "You can't reveal my identity," Henrik thought fiercely. "You're bound by magical confidentiality." "Indeed I am," the hat agreed. "Your secrets remain your own. Now, where to put you? You have the cunning and ambition for Slytherin, certainly. A thirst to prove yourself, but also courage in abundance, and loyalty to those who've raised you, misguided though they may be. Choose whatever serves my development best," Henrik thought carefully. Diplomatic answer, the hat seemed amused. "But I see deeper. You believe you know your path already, dark and light entwined in pursuit of power. Yet your heart holds questions your mind hasn't acknowledged." Henrik frowned beneath the hat. What questions? He knew his purpose perfectly well. "The greatest self-deception is believing we don't deceive ourselves," the hat continued cryptically. "You'll find truth where you least expect it, which is why you must be Gryffindor." The last word was shouted to the hall. Henrik removed the hat with steady hands that betrayed none of his shock. Gryffindor. The house of reckless bravery and Dumbledore himself. This complicated everything. As he walked to the red and gold table amid cheers, Henrik rapidly recalculated. Proximity to Dumbledore increased risks of discovery but also opportunities for intelligence gathering. Distance from Slytherin would make monitoring Death Eater connections more challenging but might allow him to move more freely without suspicion. Hermione scooted over to make room for him, beaming. "I'm so glad we're in the same house." Henrik manufactured a smile. "Me too." The first outright lie he told her, though likely not the last. Ron Weasley soon joined their table as well, completing what Henrik now recognized would be his primary social circle. Not ideal from an intelligence-gathering perspective, but adaptable. After the feast, during which Henrik carefully observed faculty dynamics while maintaining light conversation with his housemates, Dumbledore rose to give announcements. Most matched Henrik's briefings, but the warning about the third-floor corridor, suffering a most painful death, triggered his analytical instincts. Something valuable or dangerous was hidden there, information worth investigating. As the Gryffindor prefect led them through the castle's labyrinthine corridors, Henrik committed each turn to memory, building his mental map. The password-protected entrance to Gryffindor Tower, the layout of the common room, the path to the dormitories, all catalogued with precision. In the first-year boys' dormitory, Henrik claimed a bed between Neville and Ron, unpacking methodically while the others chatted excitedly. His trunk contained hidden compartments only he could access, concealing his real wand, secure communication tools, and reference materials. That night, after his dorm-mates fell asleep, Henrik slipped his hand beneath his pillow and retrieved a small obsidian disc, his primary communication device with Katarina. Touching it with his wand, he activated the encrypted connection. "First report," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Sorting complete. Placement, Gryffindor." The disc warmed briefly, acknowledging receipt of the message. The response would come later, after Katarina had processed this unexpected development. Henrik replaced the disc and stared up at the crimson canopy above his bed. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain about his path forward. The Sorting Hat's words echoed in his mind, "You'll find truth where you least expect it." What truth? He already knew who he was and what he needed to do. Didn't he? Breakfast the next morning brought Henrik's first test in maintaining his cover under direct observation. As he entered the great hall with his dorm mates, he felt the weight of faculty gazes, particularly Dumbledore's, assessing the new students. "Did you see the schedule? Potions with the Slytherins first thing," groaned Ron as they found seats at the Gryffindor table. "Fred and George say Snape's horrible to everyone except his own house." Henrik loaded his plate with a balanced selection. Nutrition had been part of his training regimen, while covertly studying the hook-nosed professor at the head table. Severus Snape, former Death Eater, supposedly reformed, Dumbledore's trusted potions master. A contradiction worth investigating. "I've been reading ahead in magical drafts and potions," Hermione announced, buttering her toast with precision. "It's fascinating how changing just one preparation method can completely alter a potion's effects." "Mental, that one," Ron whispered to Henrik, who merely shrugged. Hermione's academic enthusiasm could provide useful cover for his own advanced knowledge. The obsidian disc had warmed during the night, delivering Katarina's response, "Adapt. Observe Dumbledore closely. Gather information on Potter's reputation. Weekly reports." Henrik followed his classmates to the dungeons, where the potions classroom waited cold and imposing. He deliberately selected a middle position, not front row like the eager Hermione, not back row like those hoping to avoid attention. Strategic visibility. Professor Snape swept in dramatically, robes billowing. His opening speech about bottling fame and brewing glory contained genuine passion beneath the intimidation tactics. Henrik recognized a master in his element, however unpleasant his teaching style might be. When Snape began firing questions at the class, Henrik noticed his particular focus on the Gryffindor students. "Interesting," The house rivalry appeared to extend to faculty. Strauss. Snape barked suddenly. Where would you find a bezoar? Henrik met the professor's dark eyes calmly. In the stomach of a goat, sir. It's an antidote to most poisons. Snape's eyes narrowed slightly. And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, sir. Also called aconite. A flicker of surprise crossed Snape's face before his scowl returned. At least someone bothered to open a book before arriving. He turned away, but Henrik caught the professor's speculative glance thereafter. The potion assignment, a simple cure for boils, posed no challenge for Henrik, who had been brewing complex concoctions since age 7. The greater challenge was deliberately introducing minor inefficiencies to avoid standing out. He carefully crushed snake fangs with slightly less precision than optimal and stirred competently but not masterfully. How are you so good at this already? Ron whispered, eyeing Henrik's perfectly adequate potion with envy. My mother, Henrik replied truthfully. She believes practical skills are essential. Across the room, Draco Malfoy worked with similar competence, occasionally glancing toward the Gryffindor side with obvious disdain. When their eyes met briefly, Henrik nodded slightly, a neutral acknowledgement that seemed to surprise the Slytherin. After class, as they climbed the stairs from the dungeons, Henrik felt a presence behind him and turned to find Malfoy flanked by 2 large boys. Strauss, isn't it? Malfoy's tone carried aristocratic precision. Not a British name. German, Henrik confirmed, signaling Ron and Hermione to continue without him with a slight nod. They hesitated but moved ahead, Hermione glancing back worriedly. You seemed competent in potions. Unlike most of your house. Malfoy's pale eyes assessed him. Pity about your sorting. With that background and ability, you might have done better elsewhere. Henrik understood the overture for what it was, Malfoy identifying potential allies regardless of house. Useful. The hat makes interesting choices, Henrik replied neutrally. But house boundaries seem somewhat arbitrary in terms of actual ability. Malfoy's eyebrows rose slightly. Perhaps. Though you'll find some wizarding families are better than others. I could help you identify them, if you're interested. I appreciate the offer. Henrik gave a slight, European-style bow. I'm always interested in expanding my network of competent associates. The formality seemed to please Malfoy, who nodded with the satisfaction of someone who believed they were recruiting an asset. We'll talk again, Strauss. As Malfoy departed with his bodyguards, Henrik rejoined Ron and Hermione, who stared at him with confusion. Why were you talking to him? Ron demanded. Malfoys are bad news. My dad says his father was right in you-know-who's inner circle. Know your enemies, Henrik replied simply. Besides, alienating influential students seems counterproductive, regardless of family history. Hermione looked thoughtful. That's rather pragmatic. My mother says limiting your information sources limits your understanding. Henrik shrugged. I'm not planning to become his best friend. This explanation seemed to satisfy them, though Ron remained dubious. Henrik filed this interaction away, the Weasley-Malfoy animosity ran deep and would require navigation. As they headed to Charms, Henrik considered his first successful steps in building his network. Connections in Gryffindor for proximity to Dumbledore's favorite students, an opening with Slytherin for Death Eater intelligence, and faculty assessment underway. All according to plan, despite the unexpected house placement. Yet beneath this calculated maneuvering, something unexpected stirred, a genuine curiosity about these peers beyond their tactical value. Hermione's earnest enthusiasm, Ron's straightforward loyalty, even Neville's quiet determination despite obvious insecurity, these qualities registered as interesting, rather than merely useful. Henrik frowned slightly. Such personal interest wasn't part of the mission parameters. He would need to monitor this development carefully. The following weeks established Henrik's careful balancing act. In classes, he performed at approximately the 85th percentile, demonstrably skilled but not extraordinarily so. He answered questions when called upon but rarely volunteered, created successful spells and potions with occasional minor flaws, and generally presented as a talented student rather than a prodigy. His social integration proceeded similarly. He maintained his primary connection with Hermione and Ron while establishing cordial acquaintances across houses, including periodic civil exchanges with Malfoy that baffled his Gryffindor friends. "I don't understand how you can stand talking to him," Ron complained after seeing Henrik and Draco discussing potion ingredients in the library. "He called Hermione a, the other day." "Mud-blood," Henrik supplied calmly. "Yes, I heard. His prejudice is ignorant and counterproductive." Hermione looked up from her Transfiguration essay, expression caught between offense and curiosity. "You say that like it's a strategic error rather than morally wrong." Henrik realized his slip. He'd evaluated the slur from Grindelwald's perspective, where magical ability rather than blood status determined value. Pure blood supremacy was considered foolish rather than evil in his education. "It's both," he corrected carefully. "Morally reprehensible and strategically idiotic to alienate talented witches based on ancestry." This seemed to satisfy Hermione, though her perceptive gaze lingered on him thoughtfully. These moments of ideological disconnect occurred periodically, requiring Henrik to adjust his expressed views to match expectations. When Professor Quirrell stammered through defense against the dark arts lessons, Henrik recognized the man's falseness immediately. No one with that level of apparent anxiety could have survived actual encounters with dark creatures. But he kept this assessment private, nodding sympathetically with classmates about the poor nervous professor. More challenging were the moments when Henrik genuinely connected with his peers. During flying lessons, he discovered an unexpected natural talent on a broomstick, something none of his training had prepared him for. The sensation of flight triggered a visceral joy that broke through his carefully maintained composure. "You're a natural," Ron exclaimed as Henrik executed a perfect landing after their first proper flying session. "You should try out for Quidditch next year." "Perhaps," Henrik replied, surprised by how appealing the idea seemed. Flying felt like freedom in a way little else had in his structured life. Similar moments occurred in the Gryffindor common room during evening chess matches with Ron, whose tactical skills Henrik genuinely respected, discussions of magical theory with Hermione, whose intelligence occasionally surprised even him, and the simple rituals of dormitory life that gradually, alarmingly, began to feel like belonging. Each week, Henrik sent encrypted reports to Katerina, detailing his observations of faculty, curriculum weaknesses, castle security, and Dumbledore's movements. He documented the clear avoidance pattern between Snape and Quirrell, noted Dumbledore's frequent absences, and mapped the castle's hidden passages discovered through careful exploration. What he omitted, increasingly, were his own emotional responses, the way Hermione's friendship made him question aspects of Grindelwald's hierarchy, how the Gryffindor common room sometimes felt more like home than the fortress ever had, the growing curiosity about his birth parents that no amount of mental discipline could fully suppress. Halloween brought these conflicting loyalties to a crisis point. As Professor Quirrell burst into the Great Hall announcing a troll in the dungeons, Henrik's training immediately activated. He assessed exits, calculated threat levels, and prepared defensive measures while chaos erupted around him. Then he heard Ron's guilty admission, "Hermione doesn't know about the troll. She's been crying in the girls' bathroom all afternoon after what Malfoy said." Without conscious decision, Henrik was moving, slipping away from the prefects herding students toward dormitories. Ron followed, clearly surprised but determined. Together they navigated empty corridors toward the bathroom where Hermione remained unaware of danger. The stench reached them before they saw the troll. Mountain trolls had featured in Henrik's combat training scenarios, but the reality was more imposing than expected. 12 feet tall with granite-gray skin and a tiny head perched on a massive body, the creature dragged a club the size of a man as it lumbered into the very bathroom they sought. A scream confirmed their worst fears. "Hermione!" Ron gasped. Henrik's mind calculated options with lightning speed. Direct confrontation, high risk, multiple potential casualties. Distraction tactics, moderate risk, potential to create escape opportunity. Notification of faculty, delay factor too high, immediate action required. Get a teacher, Henrik ordered Ron. I'll distract it. But, go. Henrik shoved him toward the main corridor before drawing his secondary wand and rushing into the bathroom. The scene inside confirmed his tactical assessment. Hermione pressed against the wall, Troll advancing with raised club, minimal maneuvering space among shattered stalls and sinks. Hey! Henrik shouted, simultaneously casting a stinging hex at the creature's exposed backside. The troll roared, turning ponderously toward this new threat. Henrik moved laterally, maintaining distance while drawing the creature away from Hermione. Henrik, she cried, voice shaking. They can resist most spells, their skin's too thick. He knew this, of course, but his options with the secondary wand were limited. The troll lunged, swinging its club in a devastating arc that Henrik barely dodged. Porcelain exploded as another sink shattered. Tactical assessment, secondary wand insufficient, no faculty arrival imminent, civilian still in danger zone. Decision required. Henrik reached into his robes and withdrew his true wand, feeling its power sing through his fingers. Hermione, when I say run, head for the door. The troll advanced again, club raised. Defodio. Henrik cast, using a gouging spell not taught until 5th year. The spell struck the troll's knee, carving deep into the tough hide. The creature bellowed in pain, momentarily off balance. Run! Henrik shouted. Hermione darted toward the door but stumbled on debris. The troll, enraged, swung wildly in her direction. Time slowed as Henrik's training crystallized into pure instinct. He leapt forward, wand executing a complex pattern. Contigo Argentum. A shield of silvery energy, a modified protection charm Katarina had developed, materialized before Hermione, deflecting the club with a gonging reverberation that staggered the troll. Without pausing, Henrik slashed his wand downward. Incarcerus titanium. Metallic cords erupted from nowhere, wrapping around the troll's legs and torso in constricting bands. The creature toppled with a crash that shook the entire bathroom. Silence fell, broken only by Hermione's rapid breathing and the troll's muffled grunts as it struggled against bindings designed to hold creatures far more dangerous than itself. Reality crashed back into Henrik's awareness. He'd just performed advanced combat magic in front of a witness, magic no first year should know, using a wand no one should see. Worst, he'd revealed capabilities that threatened his entire cover. Before he could formulate damage control, running footsteps approached. Henrik quickly pocketed his true wand and drew the secondary one just as Professors McGonagall, Snape, and Quirrell burst into the bathroom. What followed was a blur of explanations, scolding, and house points. Henrik let Hermione take the lead in crafting a plausible story about looking for the troll herself and being saved by Henrik and Ron, who had returned with the teachers. He remained deliberately vague about exactly how he'd subdued the creature, implying luck and basic spells rather than advanced combat magic. McGonagall seemed too shocked by the outcome to press for details, while Quirrell appeared genuinely unsettled by the bound troll. Only Snape's gaze lingered on Henrik with calculating intensity, dark eyes narrowed in obvious suspicion. Back in Gryffindor Tower, away from faculty scrutiny, Hermione confronted him in a quiet corner of the common room. That wasn't basic magic, she whispered, eyes wide but voice steady. Those spells. They weren't even in the standard curriculum. And that wand was different from the one you normally use. Henrik assessed his options rapidly. Full denial risked alienating a valuable ally. Partial truth might satisfy curiosity while maintaining essential security. My mother's training was unconventional, he admitted quietly. Some families believe in preparing children for real threats, not just academic exercises. But those spells. Hermione hesitated. They seemed almost combat-oriented. Henrik supplied. Yes. My mother has enemies. She ensured I could protect myself. This wasn't entirely false, which made it more convincing. Hermione studied him with that unervingly perceptive gaze. "There's more you're not telling me," she stated rather than asked. Henrik met her eyes steadily. "There's more to everyone than what they share, Hermione. But I used those skills to help a friend today. Does the rest matter?" Something shifted in her expression, not quite acceptance, but a decision to defer judgment. "I suppose not. And, thank you. For saving me. That's what friends do, isn't it?" Henrik replied, surprised to find he meant it. That night, as his doormate slept, Henrik faced his secure communication disk with uncharacteristic hesitation. The incident required reporting, the combat magic usage, the witness, the faculty suspicion. But submitting a full report would likely trigger extraction protocols or demands for memory modification of witnesses. For the first time, Henrik consciously edited his report, minimizing the exposure while emphasizing the strategic advantages of maintaining his position. He justified the omissions as operational security: the fewer details transmitted, the less risk of interception. Deep down, he recognized the true reason: he didn't want to leave Hogwarts. Didn't want to lose the connections forming here. Didn't want Hermione's memory modified. As he finished the incomplete report, a realization settled like a weight in his chest. His loyalty was fragmenting, divided between his mission and these people who saw him as Henrik, not as a weapon or symbol. The Sorting Hat's words haunted him: "You'll find truth where you least expect it." What truth? That he was becoming attached? That the ideology he'd been raised with might have flaws? That Harry Potter might be more than just a convenient identity? Henrik tucked the communication disk away without answers, only questions that multiplied with each passing day at Hogwarts. As winter descended on Hogwarts, Henrik's divided existence grew increasingly complicated. The castle transformed with holiday decorations, and his classmates buzzed with excitement about returning home for Christmas, a concept alien to his experience. The fortress had never acknowledged holidays beyond their historical significance. "You're not going home for Christmas?" Hermione asked one evening in the library, where they studied together most nights. "I thought you might want to see your mother." "She's traveling for research," Henrik replied smoothly. "Alpine magical phenomena wait for no holiday." The truth was more calculated: Christmas provided perfect opportunity for exploration with minimal supervision. Most students would depart, faculty presence would decrease, and the castle's secrets would be more accessible. What Henrik hadn't anticipated was Ron's casual invitation: "You can come to the burrow if you want. Mom always makes enough food for an army anyway." The offer caught Henrik completely off guard. His mission parameters included no provisions for home visits with classmates. The intelligence-gathering potential was significant: a pure-blood family with ministry connections, but the risk of extended close observation was equally considerable. "Thank you," he replied carefully, "but I've already arranged to stay at Hogwarts." "Your family is very kind to offer, though." Ron shrugged. "Offer stands if you change your mind. Nobody should be alone at Christmas." The simple sentiment stirred something uncomfortable in Henrik's chest. He had never been truly alone at the fortress. There were always adults present, training to complete, lessons to learn. But companionship, celebration, belonging? Those concepts remained theoretical rather than experienced. As the term's end approached, Henrik intensified his investigation of the third-floor corridor mystery. Careful observation had confirmed Fluffy, the three-headed dog visible through a strategically created gap in the door, guarded something of significant value. Faculty behavior patterns, particularly Snape's and Quirrell's, suggested ongoing tension related to this object. Henrik's report to Katerina theorized that Dumbledore was protecting something from Voldemort's remaining supporters, possibly an artifact of power. Her response had been immediate and direct: identify the object. Assess acquisition potential. This mission objective collided with another development: increasing references to Harry Potter among his peers. The approach of Christmas had somehow triggered nostalgic discussions about the boy who lived and speculation about his whereabouts. It happened at Halloween, you know, Ron explained during one such conversation in the common room. 10 years ago, you know who killed his parents but couldn't kill baby Harry. That's why he's famous. No one knows where he is now, added Seamus Finnegan. My mum says Dumbledore hid him away somewhere safe until he's ready to come back. Or maybe he's already here, suggested Dean Thomas with a grin. Maybe he's undercover, studying with us right now. The comment, meant as a joke, sent ice through Henrik's veins. He maintained his neutral expression through sheer force of will. Wouldn't he have the scar? Neville asked. That lightning bolt everyone talks about. Could be hidden with magic, Ron mused. But why would he hide? He's probably got his own private tutors on some tropical island. Hermione, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. I think it must be awful, honestly. To be famous for something you can't even remember, that cost you your parents. Her insight struck uncomfortably close to Henrik's carefully buried thoughts. He'd been trained to view his parents' deaths as strategic data points, evidence of Voldemort's methods and weaknesses. But occasionally, unbidden, he wondered what Lily and James Potter had been like beyond the tactical analysis of their magical abilities and political alignments. What do you think, Henrik? Hermione asked, turning those perceptive eyes his way. He chose his words with precision. I think people often project their needs onto symbols. Harry Potter represents whatever they want him to, hero, savior, victim, mystery. The actual person probably bears little resemblance to any of those projections. A thoughtful silence followed his assessment. That's really insightful, Hermione said finally. I never considered it that way. Henrik shrugged, uncomfortable with her approval of this accidental truth. Just an observation. The conversation shifted to other topics, but the exchange lingered in Henrik's thoughts. These people discussed Harry Potter as a distant figure of legend while sitting beside him, unaware. The irony carried a strange mix of power and loneliness. When the holiday break finally arrived, Henrik bid farewell to his friends with practiced casualness, watching from the entrance hall as they departed for Hogsmeade Station. Only a handful of students remained behind, none from his year and none he considered significant to his mission. With the castle largely empty, Henrik began systematic exploration of areas previously too risky to investigate. He documented secret passages, tested the boundaries of restricted areas, and spent hours in the library's normally off-limits sections under disillusionment charms. In the restricted section, hidden among texts on ancient magic, he found references to the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary object that could transform metals to gold and produce the elixir of life. Cross-referenced with overheard faculty conversations and the timing of a Gringotts break-in reported in the Daily Prophet, Henrik formed a working theory: Dumbledore was protecting Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone at Hogwarts. His weekly report included this assessment, carefully worded to emphasize the intelligence gathering rather than any intent toward the stone itself. Katerina's response was immediate and unambiguous: confirm identity of object. Assess security measures. Prepare extraction options. The directive created Henrik's first direct mission conflict. Stealing the Philosopher's Stone aligned with Grindelwald's philosophy: such power shouldn't be hoarded but used for greater transformation of wizard society. Yet doing so meant betraying Dumbledore's trust in the school's security and potentially exposing his cover prematurely. More troubling still, it meant betraying the growing loyalty he felt toward his Hogwarts friends. Henrik found himself reluctant to imagine their reactions if he were revealed as both Harry Potter and a thief working for Grindelwald's cause. Christmas morning brought unexpected complications in the form of presents, something Henrik had limited experience with. The fortress acknowledged birthdays with practical gifts tied to training advancement, not sentimental exchanges. Yet here were packages at the foot of his bed, each representing a personal connection he'd established without fully intending to. Hermione had sent him a massive book on advanced magical theory with a note about his obvious interest in the deeper aspects of spellcraft. From Ron came a box of wizarding sweets. Even Neville had given him a rare alpine plant sample, noting Henrik's mentioned interest in his mother's research materials. Henrik stared at these offerings, momentarily frozen by their implications. These weren't tactical exchanges but genuine expressions of friendship, connections forming despite his careful compartmentalization. Most disconcerting was an unmarked package containing a shimmering, fluid-like cloth that his trained eye immediately identified as an invisibility cloak of exceptional quality. The attached note, written in looping script, read only, "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well." Henrik's hands trembled slightly as he examined the cloak. This was unmistakably meant for Harry Potter, not Henrik Strauss. Someone knew his true identity, someone with access to James Potter's possessions. Dumbledore was the obvious suspect. Was this a trap? A test? Or something else entirely, a genuine gift carrying complicated implications about what Dumbledore knew and what he intended? Henrik secured the cloak in his trunk's hidden compartment, mind racing with strategic reassessment. If Dumbledore knew his identity but hadn't confronted him directly, what game was the headmaster playing? That night, unable to sleep with questions multiplying, Henrik retrieved the invisibility cloak and ventured into the deserted castle. The garment's magic far exceeded standard disillusionment charms, rendering him truly invisible rather than merely camouflaged. His wandering led him to an unused classroom containing a single item, an ornate mirror with the inscription, "Eris stra eru oit ube kafru oit anwosi." Basic code transformation reversed it to, "I show not your face but your heart's desire." Intrigued but wary, Henrik approached cautiously, positioning himself before the reflective surface. The image that formed stole his breath away. There he stood, but not alone. On either side of him were figures he recognized instantly from photographs, Lily and James Potter, their hands resting proudly on his shoulders. Behind them stood others he didn't know, family members, perhaps grandparents and relatives he'd never known existed. But the most shocking element was himself. The reflection showed neither Henrik Strauss nor the weapon Katerina had crafted. This version of himself stood confident but open, unburdened by secrets or missions. He wore no disguise, the lightning scar visible on his forehead, green eyes bright and unclouded by calculation. Henrik stumbled backward, heart pounding painfully against his ribs. The mirror had bypassed his occlumency, his training, his carefully constructed identity to reveal something he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge, longing for the family and life that Voldemort had stolen from him. "I see you've discovered the mirror of Erist." Henrik spun, wand drawn instantly, to find Albus Dumbledore standing in the doorway. Despite his invisibility cloak, somehow the headmaster had known he was there. A remarkable object, Dumbledore continued conversationally, moving forward to stand beside Henrik, who had hastily removed the cloak. "But dangerous in its way. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they can never have." Henrik's mind raced, assessing escape routes, potential excuses, defensive options. But Dumbledore merely gazed at the mirror himself, expression momentarily distant. "What do you see, Mr. Strauss?" the headmaster asked softly. It was a test, one requiring immediate decision. Total deception, partial truth, or dangerous honesty. "My mother," Henrik replied, selecting the safest partial truth. "And others I assume are family." Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. "The mirror shows us nothing more or less than the deepest desire of our hearts. You, like many before you, see family you have lost or never truly known." The perceptiveness of this assessment unsettled Henrik deeply. He remained silent, unwilling to reveal more than necessary. "The mirror will be moved tomorrow," Dumbledore continued after a moment. "I ask that you not go looking for it again. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live." Those piercing blue eyes turned to Henrik. An important distinction that many fail to make, between what was, what might have been, and what is. The philosophical statement carried weight beyond its surface meaning. Henrik sensed layers of communication in the headmaster's words, potential knowledge of his true identity, perhaps even awareness of his mission. "I understand, Professor," Henrik replied carefully. "Do you?" Dumbledore smiled gently. "Understanding often comes in stages, Mr. Strauss. We see first with our eyes, then with our minds, and finally, most importantly, with our hearts." He gestured toward the door. "Now, I believe it's rather late. That remarkable cloak will see you safely back to Gryffindor Tower." The dismissal was clear, yet contained no reprimand for being out after curfew. Henrik gathered the invisibility cloak, mind working furiously to decode the layers of this encounter. "Good night, sir," he said politely. "Good night." Dumbledore turned back to the mirror. "Oh, and Henrik. The most powerful magic often lies not in what we can do, but in who we choose to be." That night, secure in his dormitory bed, Henrik stared sleeplessly at the canopy above him. The mirror had shown him something his training hadn't prepared him for, a vision of Harry Potter as he might have been without Grindelwald's influence. Not a weapon or a symbol, but a person with connections, heritage, identity. More disturbing still, part of him had wanted that vision desperately. His weekly report to Katerina mentioned the invisibility cloak as a potentially useful tactical asset but omitted both the mirror and Dumbledore's cryptic conversation. Some revelations felt too personal, too transformative to share with the fortress. For the first time, Henrik actively questioned not just his methods but his mission itself. What if Grindelwald's vision wasn't the only valid path? What if the connections he was forming at Hogwarts weren't merely tactical advantages but essential elements of who he could become? As students returned from holiday and classes resumed, Henrik found himself studying his friends with new awareness. Hermione's brilliant mind and fierce loyalty, Ron's strategic thinking and straightforward moral code, even Neville's quiet determination to improve despite setbacks, these qualities represented something his fortress education had never emphasized: individual worth beyond utility to a cause. This philosophical crisis compounded when Henrik discovered, through careful eavesdropping and library research, that the Philosopher's Stone's protection included contributions from various Hogwarts professors, puzzles and obstacles rather than simply deadly traps. The design suggested Dumbledore was preparing for something beyond mere security. "It's like he's testing someone," Henrik mused aloud one evening as he, Ron, and Hermione studied in the common room. "What is?" Ron asked, looking up from his charms essay. Henrik realized his slip and pivoted smoothly. "The way Professor Snape designs his exams. Multiple layers of challenge rather than straightforward testing of knowledge." "That's because potions isn't just about memorization," Hermione responded eagerly. "It's about understanding interactions and adaptations." The conversation moved on, but Henrik's thoughts remained on the stone and its protections. If Dumbledore had designed a challenge course rather than an impenetrable fortress, what was the intended lesson? And for whom? His opportunity to investigate further came unexpectedly when Hagrid, whom Henrik had cultivated as an information source through occasional friendly visits, inadvertently revealed he'd acquired a dragon egg. The resulting chaos as the gamekeeper attempted to raise a Norwegian ridgeback in his wooden hut created a perfect distraction. The night Ron's brother Charlie's friends came to collect the dragon from the astronomy tower, Henrik used his invisibility cloak to explore the third-floor corridor more thoroughly. What he discovered confirmed his assessment. Beyond the three-headed dog lay a series of challenges corresponding to different faculty specialties: Sprout's Devil's Snare, Flitwick's Enchanted Keys, McGonagall's Transfigured Chess Set, and others he couldn't yet identify. The defenses were formidable but navigable with sufficient skill and knowledge, exactly the kind of skills Henrik possessed thanks to his intensive fortress training. He could likely reach the stone if necessary. But should he? Katerina's latest directive had been unequivocal: secure the stone before term's end. Transport protocols to follow. The mission objective clashed violently with Henrik's growing doubts. Taking the stone meant betraying Dumbledore, who had returned his father's cloak and spoken to him with cryptic understanding rather than confrontation. It meant potentially endangering Hogwarts, which had become more home than the fortress had ever been. As spring advanced and exams approached, Henrik's internal conflict intensified. He maintained his cover perfectly, excelling but not exceptionally in classes, maintaining friendships, continuing his information gathering. Outwardly, Henrik Strauss remained a composed, slightly reserved transfer student with unusual magical background. Inwardly, the division between Henrik Strauss and Harry Potter blurred increasingly. Fragments of genuine identity emerged through the carefully constructed persona, his natural love of flight during Quidditch matches, his protective instincts toward friends, his curiosity about his birth parents that extended beyond tactical assessment of their capabilities. The conflict crystallized into crisis when Henrik noticed Quirrell's increasingly erratic behavior coinciding with Dumbledore's absence from the castle. Monitoring the stuttering professor had been part of his ongoing intelligence gathering, and patterns suggested the man's interest in the third-floor corridor extended beyond academic curiosity. "I think someone's going after the stone tonight," Henrik told Ron and Hermione urgently after connecting Dumbledore's sudden departure for London with Quirrell's suspicious movements. "What stone?" they asked simultaneously. Henrik hesitated only briefly before sharing his knowledge. "The Philosopher's Stone. It's hidden in the third-floor corridor, guarded by that three-headed dog and other protections." "How do you know about that?" Hermione demanded, eyes wide. "Research and observation," Henrik replied truthfully if incompletely. "The point is, Quirrell's been trying to get it all year, and with Dumbledore gone, tonight's his chance." "Quirrell?" Ron looked skeptical. "But he's terrified of his own shadow." "It's an act," Henrik stated with certainty. "A good one, but not perfect. He maintains it too consistently to be genuine." Hermione studied him with that uncomfortably perceptive gaze. "You notice a lot of things most people don't you?" "Observation is a habit," Henrik deflected. "We need to alert Professor McGonagall." But McGonagall dismissed their concerns with surprising finality, leaving Henrik with a crucial decision. His mission directive was clear: secure the stone. Quirrell's attempt created both opportunity and complication. He could allow the professor to navigate the obstacles, then intercept him before he claimed the prize. But that meant placing Hogwarts in danger from whatever Quirrell intended. The choice became clear with startling simplicity: he would protect the stone from Quirrell, but not take it himself. A direct contradiction of his orders, but the only option his newly emerging conscience would accept. "We're going ourselves," he told Ron and Hermione that evening. "Tonight. Through the trapdoor." Hermione looked alarmed. "But what about Fluffy?" "Music puts him to sleep," Henrik replied. At their surprised expressions, he added, "Hagrid mentioned it accidentally." That night, under the invisibility cloak, the three made their way to the third-floor corridor. Henrik had prepared extensively, reviewing potential countermeasures for each likely challenge, equipping himself with his true wand while keeping the secondary one visible for his friend's benefit. Fluffy yielded to a charmed music box Henrik had prepared. The devil's snare parted before Hermione's perfect blue flames. The flying keys surrendered to Henrik's exceptional broom skills. The chess set fell to Ron's strategic brilliance. Each challenge revealed his friend's capabilities beyond what classroom performance had suggested: Hermione's quick thinking under pressure, Ron's tactical genius when properly focused. Henrik found himself genuinely impressed rather than merely noting useful skills and potential assets. When they reached the potions riddle, Hermione solved it with a logic Henrik had to admire. The final bottle contained only enough potion for one person to proceed. "I'll go forward," Henrik said firmly. "You two go back, get word to Dumbledore somehow." "But Henrik," Hermione began, worry evident in her expression. "I have the best chance against Quirrell," he stated with a certainty born of years of combat training he couldn't explain to them. Hermione suddenly threw her arms around him in a tight hug, the first such contact Henrik could remember experiencing. He froze momentarily before awkwardly returning the gesture. "Be careful," she whispered. "You're brilliant, but you're not invincible." The concern in her voice, genuine fear for him as a person rather than an asset, struck Henrik with unexpected force. This was friendship beyond utility, beyond mission parameters. This was connection he hadn't trained for. "I will," he promised, meaning it more than any assurance he'd given since arriving at Hogwarts. Beyond the flames, Henrik found not just Quirrell but confirmation of his worst suspicions. The stuttering professor stood before the mirror of Eriste with confident posture and clear speech, all pretense abandoned. And he wasn't alone. A second voice, high, cold, and unnaturally resonant, emerged from beneath Quirrell's turban, issuing commands. Voldemort himself, somehow attached to his servant like a parasite. "Use the boy," the voice commanded when Quirrell failed to retrieve the stone from the mirror. Henrik's mind worked with lightning speed as Quirrell beckoned him forward. The mirror showed one's deepest desire. His original reflection had shown family and identity, but circumstances had shifted. If he appeared to desire finding the stone for Quirrell's master, the mirror might reveal its location. He needed an alternative desire strong enough to override that outcome. As he stepped before the mirror, Henrik focused with all his mental discipline on a single thought: "I want to find the stone, but only to keep it safe from Voldemort." The reflection smiled, and Henrik felt the weight of the actual philosopher's stone drop into his pocket while the mirror showed nothing of this transfer to observers. "What do you see?" demanded Quirrell. "I see myself winning the House Cup," Henrik lied smoothly, a clemency shields at full strength. "He lies," hissed the hidden voice. "Let me speak to him, face to face." What followed tested everything Henrik's training had prepared him for. The revelation of Voldemort's face emerging from the back of Quirrell's head was grotesque but less shocking than the Dark Lord's attempts at recruitment, promising power, family, resurrection of his parents in exchange for the stone. "They need not have died," Voldemort's whispering voice cajoled. "Your mother especially, she died trying to protect you. Give me the stone, and her sacrifice need not be permanent." The offer struck at vulnerabilities Henrik hadn't realized existed. The mirror had shown him the family he secretly longed for. Could Voldemort actually deliver that impossible desire? No. The rationalization crumbled instantly against everything he knew of dark magic. Resurrection was impossible. This was manipulation targeting perceived weakness. "You're lying," Henrik stated flatly, hand closing around his true wand in his pocket. "You killed them because they stood against you, and you'd kill them again without hesitation if they returned." Rage contorted Voldemort's fragmented features. "Seize him." Quirrell lunged forward, hands outstretched, only to scream in agony when his flesh contacted Henrik's. The protection Lily Potter had left in her son's blood activated, blistering the professor's skin on contact. Henrik didn't waste the advantage. Drawing his true wand with practiced speed, he cast with deadly precision. Defindo Maxima. The enhanced cutting charm, far beyond standard curriculum, severed Quirrell's wand arm at the elbow. The professor collapsed screaming while a wraith-like essence began separating from his body. Training overrode hesitation. Henrik cast a containment charm designed for malevolent spirits. Advanced magic Katarina had taught for scenarios involving hostile possession. Spiritus Catenis. Silvery chains of magical energy lashed out toward the separating wraith, only to pass through as the essence of Voldemort proved too insubstantial even for this specialized magic. The wraith howled in fury and pain as it fled through the chamber wall, leaving Quirrell collapsing into ash behind it. Henrik stood alone in the chamber, the stone heavy in his pocket, blood pounding in his ears. He had faced Voldemort, the murderer of his parents, the dark wizard whose ideology Katarina had taught him to despise while preparing him to eventually replace. The encounter should have reinforced his mission parameters. Instead, it shattered them. Voldemort had offered him exactly what the mirror of Eriste had shown: family restored, identity reclaimed, in exchange for loyalty to a cause. Just as Katarina and the fortress had done, shaping him into a weapon for Grindelwald's vision while promising him significance and purpose. Different ideologies, same methodology. Different Dark Lords, same expectation of unwavering loyalty. For the first time, Harry, saw with perfect clarity the manipulation underlying both paths laid before him. Voldemort would use him as a symbol of conquered prophecy. Grindelwald's followers would use him as a symbol of ideological revival. Neither saw him as a person with choices of his own. When Dumbledore arrived minutes later, somehow knowing exactly where to find him, Harry made no attempt to hide his true wand or advanced magical knowledge. The headmaster's eyes noted these details with unsurprised recognition. "I believe, Mr. Strauss, or should I say, Mr. Potter, that we have much to discuss," Dumbledore said gently. "But perhaps the hospital wing first." As Dumbledore levitated him toward medical attention, Harry felt the weight of the obsidian communication disc in his pocket alongside the stone. Both represented obligations and loyalties now thrown into question. Hogwarts had changed him in ways Katerina hadn't anticipated and couldn't control. The question now was what he would do with that change, and how long he could maintain his increasingly fragmented existence before everything collapsed around him. Chapter 3, Blood of the Covenant. Harry Potter stared at the hospital wing ceiling, mind racing despite Madame Pomfrey's sleeping draught. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Quirrell and Voldemort. 3 days of feigning unconsciousness whenever anyone entered his curtained area. 3 days to process what had happened and what it meant. The Philosopher's Stone sat hidden beneath Dumbledore's complex enchantment somewhere in the castle. Harry's mission to acquire it lay in ruins, along with his certainty about nearly everything else. Katerina's communication disc had heated repeatedly, demanding response. He'd ignored it. What could he possibly report? That he'd failed to secure the stone? That he'd confronted Voldemort and hesitated to complete his mission? That he was questioning everything about the ideology he'd been raised with? A rustle of curtains interrupted his thoughts. Harry's hand moved reflexively toward his wand, then stilled as Hermione's bushy hair appeared, followed by Ron's freckled face. "You're awake," Hermione whispered, eyes bright with relief. "We've been so worried." "Dumbledore wouldn't tell us anything except that you stopped Quirrell," Ron added, dropping into the chair beside Harry's bed. "Whole school's talking about it." Harry pushed himself upright, studying his friends with new awareness. These weren't merely assets or covers anymore. Their concern was genuine, their friendship real in a way nothing at the fortress had been. "What exactly are they saying?" he asked cautiously. "That you saved the Philosopher's Stone," Hermione replied. "That Quirrell was working for you-know-who and tried to steal it, but you stopped him somehow. Everyone's wondering how a first-year managed it." Harry nodded slowly. The official narrative maintained his cover as Henrik Strauss, talented but ordinary student. Dumbledore had protected his secrets, for now. What really happened down there? Ron leaned forward eagerly. "After Hermione and I went back." Harry hesitated. The truth would expose too much, but these two deserved better than complete fabrication. "Quirrell was possessed," he said finally. "By Voldemort." He ignored Ron's flinch at the name. "They wanted the stone to create a new body. I managed to stop them, but it was close." Hermione's perceptive gaze didn't waver. "You're not telling us everything." "No," Harry admitted. "I'm not." The simple honesty hung between them, creating either a bridge or a barrier depending on what followed. "Does it have something to do with that other wand you used?" Hermione pressed. "Or how you knew so much about the protections?" Harry met her eyes, decision crystallizing. "Yes. But I can't explain everything yet. I need time to figure things out myself." Ron looked confused, but Hermione nodded slowly. "Okay. But Henrik, or whoever you are, we're your friends. That doesn't change because you have secrets." The declaration hit Harry with unexpected force. Friendship without conditions. Support without expectation of return. Concepts entirely foreign to his fortress upbringing. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means more than you know." Before they could respond, the hospital wing doors opened, and Albus Dumbledore strode in. His expression remained pleasant, but his eyes missed nothing as he spotted the visitors. "Ah, Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley. I'm pleased to see Mr. Strauss awake," but I'm afraid I must ask for a private word with him. Perhaps you could visit again tomorrow?" The dismissal was gentle but firm. After quick goodbyes, Harry found himself alone with the headmaster, the man he'd been trained to view as Grindelwald's greatest betrayer, his own abandoner, and his primary intelligence target. Dumbledore settled into the chair beside the bed, studying Harry over half-moon spectacles. "I believe, Harry, that we have put off our conversation long enough." The use of his real name confirmed what Harry had suspected. "You've known who I am all along." "Since the moment the Sorting Hat placed you," Dumbledore nodded. "Though I suspected from your first appearance on the train. The disguise is quite good, but there are aspects of Lily Potter in your features that no charm can fully conceal." Harry felt strangely calm now that the deception had collapsed. "Why didn't you expose me?" "For the same reason you came to Hogwarts, I imagine, to discover truth." Dumbledore's blue eyes held no twinkle now, only intense focus. "Though perhaps we sought different versions of it." "You know who took me," Harry stated rather than asked. "You know I was raised by Grindelwald's followers." "Katarina Strauss," Dumbledore confirmed. "Once among Gellert's most brilliant lieutenants. She disappeared after his defeat, presumed dead by most. I should have anticipated her interest in you after Voldemort's fall." "Why?" The question encompassed everything: why Harry had been targeted, why Dumbledore had left him with the Dursleys, why any of this had happened. A complex question deserving a complex answer. Dumbledore sighed. "Katarina saw in you a symbol that could revive Grindelwald's cause, the boy who lived, reforged as a new champion for wizard dominance. As for my part in this tale..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I placed you with your aunt because blood protection is the strongest magic against those who would harm you. I failed to anticipate that the protection itself could be undermined through prolonged contact. She spent months weakening the wards," Harry confirmed. "She told me. A mistake I will always regret." Genuine remorse colored Dumbledore's voice. "One of many where you are concerned, I fear." Harry absorbed this, reconciling it with Katarina's portrayal of Dumbledore as calculating and manipulative. Both versions contained truth, it seemed. "What happens now?" he asked. "Are you going to send me back to the Dursleys? Is that what you want?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "Nor would I suggest it," Dumbledore replied. "The blood protection is broken, and they were less than ideal guardians in any case." Harry's lip curled slightly at the understatement. "They kept me in a cupboard." Pain flashed across Dumbledore's face. "Another failure I must own. I believed you would be safe, if not happy. I was wrong." The admission surprised Harry. His fortress education had portrayed Dumbledore as incapable of acknowledging mistakes. "What about Katarina?" he asked, the name feeling strange on his tongue after years of calling her only mentor or teacher. "That, Harry, is largely up to you." Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. "She has raised you for 10 years, trained you, shaped your understanding of the world. However misguided her purpose, there is clearly a bond between you." Harry frowned, uncomfortable with Dumbledore's perception. "She trained me as a weapon, not a child. And yet, when faced with Voldemort and the opportunity to take the Philosopher's Stone for your mission, you chose differently." Dumbledore's gaze was penetrating. "That choice reveals much about both your character and her influence. People are rarely just one thing, Harry, neither purely light nor wholly dark. Katarina Strauss included." The observation unsettled Harry. He'd begun questioning his mission and Grindelwald's ideology, yes, but he hadn't fully examined his complex feelings toward Katarina herself. "She'll come looking for me," he said finally. "Once I stop reporting." "Indeed she will." Dumbledore nodded. "Which presents us with several options, none without risk." "You want to capture her." Harry felt strangely protective despite everything. Katarina had been his entire world for a decade. "I want to protect you," Dumbledore corrected. While allowing you the agency to make your own choices about your future. Something I suspect has been in short supply in your life. Harry stared at the headmaster, looking for manipulation beneath the compassionate words. He found complexity, sadness, determination, but not the cold calculation Katerina had described. "What are you suggesting?" he asked cautiously. "That you return to Hogwarts next year as yourself, as Harry Potter. That we acknowledge your unusual education without revealing its source. And that you decide what relationship, if any, you wish to maintain with Katerina Strauss." The proposal stunned Harry. No demands for loyalty, no extraction of information about the fortress, no insistence on cutting ties with his past. "Why would you trust me with that choice?" he asked bluntly. "I was trained to undermine everything you stand for." Dumbledore smiled slightly. "And yet here you sit, having protected the Philosopher's Stone rather than claiming it. Having formed genuine friendships rather than merely tactical alliances. Having questioned the ideology impressed upon you since childhood." He rose from his chair. "We are not defined by our training, Harry, but by our choices. Your choices thus far give me reason to trust those you'll make in future." As Dumbledore turned to leave, Harry called after him, "Wait, what about this year? The term isn't over. For now, Henrik Strauss will complete his first year at Hogwarts. We'll discuss the transition over the summer." Dumbledore paused at the curtain. "Oh, and Harry? The mirror's reflection, what you truly saw that night, speaks volumes about who you really are." After the headmaster departed, Harry sank back against his pillows, mind whirling with possibilities he'd never allowed himself to consider. Freedom to choose. Identity beyond mission. Connection beyond utility. And beneath it all, the question he couldn't yet answer: who was Harry Potter without Katerina Strauss's vision to define him? The remainder of term passed in a blur of exams, whispers about his confrontation with Quirrell, and Harry's internal struggle to reconcile his fragmenting identities. He maintained Henrik Strauss's cover publicly while privately grappling with the implications of becoming Harry Potter again. The communication disc remained silent in his trunk, untouched despite its periodic heating. Harry knew the silence was temporary. Sooner or later, Katerina would demand answers, or worse, come looking for them herself. At the end of your feast, Gryffindor won the House Cup thanks to last-minute points awarded for the trio's adventure with the stone. As golden plates filled with food and his housemates celebrated around him, Harry found himself watching Hermione, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since their hospital wing conversation. Later, in the common room amid the celebration, he found her alone by a window, staring out at the darkened grounds. "Enjoying the victory?" he asked, settling beside her. "Just thinking," she replied, turning those perceptive eyes his way. "About what happens next?" Harry tensed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I've been doing research," Hermione said quietly. "About Harry Potter, the scar, his parents, what happened that night. And about Gellert Grindelwald and his followers." Harry's breath caught. "Hermione, you don't have to confirm anything," she interrupted, voice barely above a whisper. "But I want you to know that whatever you decide to do, I'll help you." She hesitated, then added, "I know what it's like to not quite belong anywhere." "Not really. To have to pretend to be something you're not to fit in." The simple empathy, free of judgment or demand, broke something in Harry's carefully constructed composure. For the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, he let his true face show in his expression, the calculated mask dropping to reveal the confused, divided person beneath. "I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted, the words painful in their honesty. "Henrik or Harry. Everything I thought I knew, everything I was raised to believe, I'm not sure about any of it now." Hermione reached out, hesitantly taking his hand. "Maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe you can be both, take the best parts of both lives and make something new." The wisdom in her words struck Harry deeply. Not rejection of everything from the fortress, not uncritical acceptance of Dumbledore's world, but synthesis, a path of his own making. How did you figure it out? He asked, curious despite himself. Little things. Your knowledge of spells no first year should know. The German accent that sometimes slips. The way you talk about Harry Potter in the third person, but with unusual insight. She smiled slightly. And you look at Professor Dumbledore like he personally offended you. Harry couldn't help a short laugh. That obvious? Only to someone paying attention, she assured him. Ron hasn't noticed a thing. The train ride back to London the next day felt surreal. As his classmates chattered excitedly about summer plans, Harry sat quietly, mentally preparing for what awaited at King's Cross. Dumbledore had arranged a ministry safe house where Harry could stay while decisions about his future were made, but first, he had to navigate the platform without being intercepted by Katerina. When the Hogwarts Express finally slowed to a stop, Harry hung back, letting other students disembark first. Ron had already spotted his family's distinctive red hair through the window. "You'll write this summer, won't you?" Hermione asked as they prepared to leave their compartment. "I'll try," Harry promised, knowing communication might be complicated depending on how events unfolded. On the platform, chaos reigned as usual, families reuniting, trunks being loaded onto trolleys, owls screeching in their cages. Harry scanned the crowd warily, looking for Katerina's tall figure and sharp features. He spotted her instantly. Not attempting to blend in or disguise herself, she stood perfectly still amid the movement, blue eyes locked directly on him. Their gazes met across the platform, and Harry felt the weight of everything between them, 10 years of training, manipulation, and complex attachment. Dumbledore's representative, a tall, dark-skinned Auror introduced only as Kingsley, materialized at Harry's elbow. "There's a portkey ready," he murmured. "We should move quickly." Harry hesitated, still holding Katerina's gaze. This was the moment to break cleanly, to go with Kingsley, to embrace the protection Dumbledore offered, to leave Grindelwald's legacy behind. But nothing was that simple. Whatever Katerina had done, whatever her motives, she was the closest thing to family he had known. He couldn't just disappear without confronting her directly. "I need to speak with her first," Harry said quietly. Kingsley frowned. That wasn't the plan. Plans change. Harry handed his trunk to the Auror. "I'll meet you at the arranged location in 3 days. Dumbledore won't approve," Kingsley warned. "Dumbledore said I get to make my own choices now." Harry's voice hardened slightly. "This is my choice." After a tense moment, Kingsley nodded reluctantly. 3 days. Then we come looking." Harry navigated through the crowd toward Katerina, who hadn't moved. As he approached, he noted the tension in her posture, the calculation in her gaze, assessing threats, planning contingencies, exactly as she'd taught him. "Henrik," she greeted him, voice controlled despite the public setting. "I was concerned when communication ceased." "We need to talk," Harry replied in German, "but not here." Katerina nodded once, extending her arm in silent invitation. Harry hesitated only briefly before taking it, feeling the familiar compression of apparition as platform 9 3/4 disappeared. They reappeared not at the Alpine fortress as Harry had expected, but in a modest London flat he didn't recognize. Emergency safe house, his trained mind categorized automatically. Defensive wards, multiple escape routes, minimal personal markers. "Sit," Katerina instructed, gesturing to a simple dining table. She moved to the kitchen, returning with 2 cups of tea as if this were a normal homecoming rather than the culmination of months of deception and revelation. Harry remained standing. "You knew Dumbledore would recognize me." Katerina set the cups down carefully. "I calculated a 73% probability, yes. You sent me anyway." The accusation hung between them. "Why?" "Because encounter is the most effective teacher." Katerina finally looked up, her blue eyes sharp but not cold. "Theory and preparation have limits. True understanding requires direct experience." "You wanted me to see him as he truly is," Harry realized. Not just your description of him. Yes. Katerina gestured again to the chair opposite her. Please sit, Henrik. Or do you prefer Harry now? The question carried layers of meaning beyond the simple choice of name. Harry sat slowly, studying the woman who had shaped every aspect of his development for a decade. I don't know, he answered honestly. Katerina nodded as if this answer satisfied her. Tell me what you learned this year. The request felt so familiar, debriefings had followed every training exercise at the fortress. But this wasn't a tactical assessment, it was a fundamental reckoning. I learned that ideology without connection is empty, Harry said after a moment. That power without purpose is meaningless. That people are more complex than any system that tries to categorize them. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps respect, crossed Katerina's face. Profound observations. And your assessment of Albus Dumbledore? Harry considered carefully. Not the monster you described. Not the saint others believe. A man carrying the weight of his own mistakes while trying to prevent greater ones. Diplomatically put. Katerina sipped her tea. And your mission? The stone. Failed. Harry met her gaze directly. I chose not to take it. Why? The simple question demanded a complex answer. Harry gathered his thoughts, knowing this response would define whatever came next between them. Because Grindelwald's vision and methods aren't so different from Voldemort's in practice, he said finally. Both demand absolute loyalty to an ideology. Both use people as means rather than ends. Both believe the pain of individuals is acceptable for the greater good, a concept defined solely by those in power. Katerina's expression hardened. A false equivalence. Grindelwald sought liberation for all magical kind. Voldemort sought personal power and pure-blood supremacy. The stated goals differ, Harry acknowledged. But the methods align more than you admit. And neither asked those they claimed to champion what they actually wanted. Visionaries rarely conduct polls before changing the world, Katerina replied with a touch of the cold sarcasm Harry remembered well from training sessions. No, Harry agreed. But true visionaries create space for others to choose, not systems that eliminate choice entirely. Silence fell between them, charged with the weight of ideology challenged and authority questioned. Finally, Katerina set down her cup with deliberate precision. You formed attachments at Hogwarts, she stated. Beyond tactical utility. Yes. This was anticipated, though perhaps not to this extent. Her clinical tone couldn't quite mask what might have been disappointment. Emotional connection is a powerful influence, particularly for someone your age. It's not just emotional, Harry countered. It's logical. Grindelwald's vision failed because it dismissed individual worth in favor of abstract benefit. The same flaw exists in Voldemort's approach, just with different beneficiaries. Katerina studied him with new intensity. You've grown beyond our projections, Henrik. Your analytical abilities have developed along unexpected vectors. The assessment was classic Katerina, evaluating even this confrontation as a data point in his development. But beneath the clinical exterior, Harry sensed something else, uncertainty, perhaps even pride. What happens now? He asked, echoing his question to Dumbledore. That depends on your choices. Katerina leaned forward slightly. Dumbledore has made his offer, I presume. Protection, rehabilitation, a new identity aligned with his values. And yours? Harry prompted, knowing there would be a counterproposal. Partnership, Katerina replied simply. Not as mentor and student, but as equals in a cause that evolves with new understanding. Grindelwald's core vision, magical liberation, adapted to address the flaws you've identified. The offer surprised Harry. He had expected demands for loyalty, threats of consequences, perhaps even magical coercion. Instead, Katerina was acknowledging his growth and offering evolution rather than enforcement. Why? He asked suspiciously. Why adapt rather than insist on the original plan? Something shifted in Katarina's expression, a rare glimpse behind her controlled exterior. Because you are the only success in my life's work, Henrik. Not as the weapon we intended, perhaps, but as something more valuable, a mind capable of transcending its conditioning to reach independent conclusions. The raw honesty stunned Harry. In 10 years, he had never heard Katarina speak with such personal investment. And, she continued more quietly, because you are the closest thing to family I have permitted myself since Grindelwald's fall. The admission hung in the air between them, recontextualizing a decade of stern training and emotional distance. Harry suddenly understood what Dumbledore had meant about the bond between them being more complex than he acknowledged. I need time, he said finally. To think. To decide. Katarina nodded once. You have 3 days before Dumbledore's people come looking, according to your arrangement with Shacklebolt. Harry blinked in surprise. You were watching. Always. The single word carried both reassurance and warning. Whatever you decide, remember that nothing is irrevocable. Paths diverge and reconnect throughout life. As Harry stood to leave, Katarina had provided a secure room down the hall. He paused. Did you ever care? About me, not just what I could do for the cause. Katarina met his gaze steadily. I did not permit myself to care initially. It would have compromised the mission. But over time. She hesitated, seemingly struggling with unfamiliar emotional territory. Over time, lines blurred. The distinction between asset and child became difficult to maintain. It wasn't a declaration of maternal love, but from Katarina, it was perhaps the closest equivalent possible. Harry nodded once in acknowledgement before retreating to the spare room, mind swirling with new complications. 3 days to decide between Dumbledore's protection and Katarina's partnership. Between Harry Potter and Henrik Strauss. Between rejection of his past and integration of all he had learned. But as he settled onto the narrow bed, a third option began forming in his mind, one neither Dumbledore nor Katarina had considered. Harry woke to the sound of shattering wards. His combat training activated instantly. Rolling from bed, he retrieved his true wand from beneath his pillow and cast a perimeter alarm spell of his own design. The feedback confirmed what he already suspected, multiple attackers breaching Katarina's protections with focused precision. Death Eaters. The magical signatures carried dark residue consistent with Voldemort's followers. Harry moved silently to the door, listening for movement in the flat. He heard Katarina's voice, calm despite the danger, speaking German with clinical detachment. Breach at Northern Ward Line. 4 signatures, possibly 5. Anti-apparition field already established. She was talking to him, knowing he would be awake and listening. Providing tactical information while appearing to assess the situation aloud. Harry quickly pulled on clothes, mind racing through scenarios. How had they found this location? Why attack now? The timing suggested they had tracked him from King's Cross, perhaps waiting to confirm his identity before striking. A crash from the main room indicated physical breach of the flat's outer defenses. Harry cast a disillusionment charm on himself and slipped into the hallway, keeping to the shadows despite the magical camouflage. The scene in the living room made his blood run cold. Katarina stood in the center, wand raised as 4 black-robed figures surrounded her. Their silver masks confirmed Harry's assessment, Death Eaters, not Ministry Aurors or Dumbledore's people. Where is the boy? Demanded the tallest figure, voice distorted by the mask but recognizably aristocratic. We know you have him, Strauss. I have many things, Katarina replied with deadly calm. You'll need to be more specific. A jet of red light, cruciatus from the magical signature, shot from another Death Eater's wand. Katarina deflected it with contemptuous ease, countering with a spell that sent the attacker crashing into a bookcase. Crude, she commented. Bellatrix would be disappointed in her protégés. The name drop was calculated to provoke, and it worked. 2 Death Eaters attacked simultaneously, forcing Katarina into a defensive stance that, while impressive, left her unable to counter effectively. Harry assessed the situation with cold precision. 4 against 1, with Katerina already showing signs of magical strain from the collapsed wards. Intervention required, but direct confrontation risked exposing his position. Decision made, Harry silently cast a modified concussive hex at the ceiling above 2 of the attackers. Plaster and wood crashed down, momentarily disorienting them. In the confusion, he sent a bone-breaking curse at the wand arm of the Death Eater nearest Katerina. The man screamed, wand clattering to the floor as his radius and ulna shattered. Katerina wasted no time exploiting the advantage, casting a cutting charm that sliced through another attacker's defensive shield and into his torso. "The boy's here," shouted the leader, spinning toward Harry's position despite the disillusionment charm. "Find him." Harry abandoned stealth for mobility, rolling to avoid a blasting curse that destroyed the hallway wall behind him. His combat training took over: assess, target, neutralize. 3 opponents remaining, 2 focused on him, 1 still engaging Katerina. Tenebris Secus. Harry cast, filling the room with impenetrable darkness that only the caster could see through. Advanced dark magic Adalbert had taught him for exactly such scenarios. In the artificial night, Harry moved with lethal efficiency. A cutting charm to the leader's legs, severing tendons. A concussion hex to the temple of the Death Eater still fighting Katerina. A binding curse on the third, who was firing spells blindly into the darkness. When Harry dispelled the blackness 30 seconds later, 3 Death Eaters lay incapacitated on the floor. The fourth had disappeared, fled through the broken window, most likely. Katerina stood amid the destruction, blood trickling from a cut on her cheek but otherwise unharmed. Her eyes found Harry's, registering both his wand work and his unhesitating response to the threat. "Voldemort's people," she confirmed unnecessarily. "They've identified you." Harry nodded, already casting detection spells to check for additional threats. "The wards were compromised. We need to move." "Agreed. Collect only essentials." Katerina moved to a painting on the wall, revealing a hidden safe behind it. 3 minutes until ministry response based on magical discharge levels. They worked in practice tandem, gathering only critical items, identification documents, emergency funds, weaponry disguised as ordinary objects. Harry returned to his room, retrieving his secondary wand and communication disc, along with the shrunken trunk containing his Hogwarts possessions. 2 minutes and 40 seconds after the battle ended, they slipped through a hidden passage in the pantry that connected to the adjacent building's cellar. Katerina led the way through a maze of pre-established escape routes until they emerged 6 blocks away in a busy commercial district where their magical signatures would be harder to isolate. "The fortress," Katerina stated rather than suggested. "It remains secure." Harry hesitated. Returning to the Alps meant postponing his meeting with Kingsley, potentially triggering a search by Dumbledore's people. But with Death Eaters actively hunting him, strategic retreat made sense. "They knew exactly where to find us," he noted as they navigated through the crowd toward the nearest international apparition point. "How?" A question with disturbing implications, Katerina replied grimly. "Either our security protocols were compromised, or they have resources we didn't anticipate," Harry finished. "Magical tracking methods beyond standard countermeasures." "Precisely." Katerina glanced at him sideways. "Your combat performance was exceptional. You've integrated your training impressively." The praise, rare from Katerina, felt strangely hollow in the aftermath of violence. Harry had responded automatically, using lethal and near-lethal spells without hesitation. The ease with which he'd incapacitated trained Death Eaters should have felt satisfying, validation of years of preparation. Instead, he felt unsettled. Not by the violence itself, but by the person he'd become who could execute such actions with mechanical efficiency. "They'll try again," he said, changing the subject. "Now that they've confirmed who I am." "Yes." Katerina guided them into an alley where privacy allowed for direct apparition. "Which makes your decision more urgent than anticipated." Harry met her gaze steadily. I need to contact Dumbledore. Let him know what happened. A flash of something, disappointment, perhaps resignation, crossed Katerina's face before she nodded once. From the fortress. After we've secured our position. The double apparition to their international transit point followed by the journey to the Alpine fortress left Harry magically drained but alert. As they approached the familiar stone structure perched impossibly on its mountain peak, he felt a complex mixture of emotions, nostalgia, wariness, the muscle memory of a place that had shaped his entire existence. 6 of the original 7 Grindelwald loyalists awaited them inside, alerted by Katerina's advance message. Their faces showed varying degrees of concern, calculation, and in Rolf's case, genuine relief at seeing Harry unharmed. Death Eaters attacked our London safe house, Katerina announced without preamble. They've identified Henrik and actively seek him. How? Demanded Adalbert, his ancient face creased with concern. Our concealment work was flawless. Unknown, Katerina replied. But the implications extend beyond this incident. If Voldemort's followers have developed methods to track magical signatures through our barriers, then all our locations are potentially compromised, finished Marcus grimly. As the adults devolved into tactical discussion about security protocols and magical countermeasures, Harry slipped away to his old room. Nothing had changed in the year he'd been gone: the narrow bed, the shelves of books on magical theory and combat, the desk where he'd spent countless hours studying Grindelwald's ideology. Yet everything felt different. The space seemed smaller, the books more obviously selected for their ideological content rather than comprehensive education, the entire environment designed for creating a weapon rather than nurturing a child. Harry pulled out his communication disc, modifying its encryption to contact not Katerina but Hermione. They had exchanged contact protocols before leaving Hogwarts, with Hermione keeping a paired disc in case of emergency. Now he needed information only she could safely access. Hermione, he whispered to the disc. Priority message. Death Eaters attacked our location. Currently secure but situation volatile. Need information on recent Death Eater movements and Ministry response to incident in London. Also, can you alert Dumbledore without alerting authorities? Will contact again when possible. The disc warmed, indicating successful transmission. Harry tucked it away, then turned to find Rolf standing in the doorway, watching him with an unreadable expression. Your room felt empty without you, the potions master said gruffly. The whole fortress did. Harry studied the man who had come closest to showing him genuine care during his childhood. Did any of you ever question it? Taking me, raising me as a weapon. Rolf sighed heavily, entering the room to sit on the edge of the bed. Some of us did. Not at first, then it was all about the cause, about honoring Grindelwald's vision. But over years, watching you grow. He shook his head. Children have a way of changing perspectives. But not enough to stop it, Harry noted without accusation. No, Rolf acknowledged. By then, the commitment was made. And you were thriving in your way, brilliant, capable, advancing beyond our expectations. Becoming exactly what you designed me to be. Perhaps. Or perhaps becoming yourself despite our efforts. Rolf studied him with surprising insight. You've changed at Hogwarts. Found something we couldn't give you. Harry didn't deny it. Friendship. Choice. Perspective beyond a single ideology. Rolf nodded slowly. Katerina won't easily accept that. The cause has been her entire life since Grindelwald's fall. And you. He hesitated. You became more than an asset to her, though she'd never admit it openly. I know, Harry said quietly. That's what makes this complicated. Before Rolf could respond, alarms blared throughout the fortress. Harry was on his feet instantly, wand drawn. Perimeter breach, Rolf identified, moving toward the door. Multiple contacts at the eastern approach. Harry followed him to the fortress's central chamber, where magical monitors displayed the situation. Red indicators showed at least a dozen intruders scaling the supposedly unassailable eastern cliff face, the fortress's most naturally defended approach. Death Eaters? Harry asked, scanning the tactical display. Unknown, Katarina replied, fingers manipulating the monitoring spells to enhance their information. Magical signatures partially masked. Professional work. Ministry, suggested Marcus nervously. Unlikely. This approach indicates familiarity with our defenses. Katarina turned to Harry. Did you reveal our location to Dumbledore? No, Harry answered truthfully. I haven't contacted him yet. The suspicion in her eyes stung more than he expected. After everything, after fighting alongside her against the Death Eaters, she still questioned his loyalty. Magical signatures identified, announced Adalbert from another monitoring station. Dark residue consistent with Voldemort's inner circle. Malfoy, Dolohov, possibly Rookwood among them. How did they find this place? Rolf demanded. It's unplottable, under Fidelius, with generations of protective enchantments. Harry's mind raced, connecting pieces. Me, he realized. They're tracking me somehow. The London attack was confirmation, and they followed my magical signature here. Impossible, Katarina stated flatly. No tracking spell could penetrate our protections. Unless they're not using standard methods, Harry countered. Voldemort connected with me through my scar. What if his followers found a way to exploit that connection? The suggestion silenced the room. It was both plausible and terrifying in its implications. No conventional defense could block a connection forged through the killing curse that had linked Harry and Voldemort. They'll breach the outer wards in approximately 10 minutes, Adalbert announced grimly. Katarina's expression hardened into battle readiness. Prepare for siege protocol. Rolf, activate the elemental defenses. Marcus, secure the archive. Adalbert, prepare the escape route. As the others moved to their tasks, Katarina turned to Harry. Go to the secure chamber. We'll hold them off while you— No, Harry interrupted firmly. I'm not hiding while you fight my battle. This isn't about bravery, she snapped. It's about preserving what matters most. You are the objective, both ours and theirs. Which is exactly why I should face them, Harry argued. This ends now, the manipulation, the competing claims on my destiny. I'm not a weapon or a symbol for anyone to use anymore. Something shifted in Katarina's expression, surprise, reassessment, perhaps even respect. What do you propose? Contact Dumbledore, Harry said decisively. Right now. Tell him what's happening. Alliance with our ideological enemy? Adalbert had returned in time to hear the suggestion, his aged face contorted with outrage. Unthinkable. Pragmatic, Harry countered. Death Eaters are the immediate threat to everyone. Dumbledore has resources we need, and he'll protect the boy who lived regardless of philosophical differences. Katarina studied him intently, seeing not the child she had raised but the strategic thinker she had created. Temporary alliance against a common enemy. Conditional cooperation rather than surrender. Yes. Harry held her gaze. And afterward, I make my own choice about my future. No coercion from either side. A tense silence fell, broken only by the continuing alarm signals. Finally, Katarina nodded once. Contact him. But we negotiate terms before he arrives. Harry didn't waste time arguing. His communication disc wouldn't reach Dumbledore directly, but Hermione would know how to alert the headmaster. He sent a brief, encoded message with their coordinates and situation. 7 minutes to breach, Rolf reported, returning from activating the fortress's ancient defensive enchantments. We should move to defensible positions. What followed was a coordinated preparation for battle that reflected years of training and planning. Potion traps were set along likely intrusion routes. Enchanted objects were positioned to activate when triggered by unauthorized magic. The fortress's occupants spread throughout the structure in predetermined defensive formations. Harry, despite Katarina's objections, positioned himself in the central chamber where he could respond to breaches in any direction. His true wand hummed with readiness in his hand, responding to the adrenaline coursing through him. 3 minutes, came Adalbert's voice through their communication system. Harry used the time to center himself mentally, reviewing combat spells and strategies. This wouldn't be like the London skirmish. A dozen Death Eaters meant a coordinated assault team, likely including Voldemort's most dangerous followers. 1 minute. Eastern wards failing. Katarina appeared at Harry's side, her own wand drawn and expression coldly determined. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "know that I am proud of what you've become. Even if it isn't what we planned." Before Harry could respond, the fortress shuddered as the outer wards collapsed. Seconds later, explosions echoed from the eastern wing as the first intruders breached the physical structure. "They're through." Marcus's voice called through the communication system. Eastern corridor, multiple targets. The battle erupted with shocking violence. Death Eaters poured through the breach point, their silver masks gleaming in the magical lights of the fortress. Spells flew in blinding arcs, killing curses, torture hexes, dark magic rarely seen outside Azkaban's most secure cells. Grindelwald's loyalists responded with equally devastating force. Whatever their ideological differences from conventional wizarding society, they were combat veterans of the highest caliber. The fortress itself fought alongside them, ancient enchantments activating to target intruders. Harry moved through the chaos with the fluid precision his training had instilled, casting shields and counter curses while analyzing the attackers' patterns. This wasn't a capture mission, the Death Eaters were using lethal force without hesitation. They wanted him dead, not captured. "They're targeting the support structures," Adalbert shouted as a massive explosion rocked the western wing. "They're trying to bring down the entire fortress." Harry realized the tactical approach with sickening clarity. Unable to quickly overcome the defenders, the Death Eaters were attempting to collapse the mountain fortress with everyone inside. A burial rather than a battle. Another explosion sent stone debris raining from the ceiling. The fortress's structural integrity was compromised, ancient stone groaning under forces it was never designed to withstand. "Fall back to the secure chamber," Katarina ordered through the communication system. Evacuation protocol initiated. As defenders began strategic withdrawal toward the fortress's core, Harry found himself separated from Katarina by a collapsed passage. 3 Death Eaters advanced on his position, firing killing curses that forced him into increasingly defensive postures. "Potter," called the lead attacker, voice distorted but recognizable as Lucius Malfoy. "The Dark Lord sends his regards." Harry ducked behind a partially collapsed column, mind racing through options. Direct confrontation against 3 opponents with killing intent meant likely defeat. Retreat path cut off by debris. Offensive strategy required. Decision made, Harry pointed his wand at the already damaged ceiling above the Death Eaters. Confringo Maxima. The blasting curse struck with devastating precision, bringing tons of stone down on the attackers. 2 disappeared beneath the collapse instantly. The third, Malfoy, barely shielded in time but found himself trapped behind the new barrier. Harry used the momentary advantage to navigate around the rubble, seeking a path to the secure chamber. The fortress continued to shudder and groan around him, more sections collapsing with each passing minute. He found Rolf in a side passage, bleeding heavily from a curse wound to his shoulder. "Can't stop the bleeding," the potion's master gasped as Harry knelt beside him. "Dark magic in the wound." Harry recognized the curse signature, a blood-draining hex designed to prevent magical healing. Without specialized treatment, Rolf would bleed out within minutes. "The secure chamber has medical supplies," Harry said, helping the man to his feet. "We need to move now." They staggered through increasingly unstable corridors, debris falling around them as the fortress continued its slow collapse. Twice they encountered Death Eaters, whom Harry dispatched efficiently, a bodybind curse for one, a concussion hex that rendered the other unconscious. The secure chamber, originally designed as Grindelwald's personal sanctuary within the fortress, stood behind heavy enchanted doors at the mountain's core. As Harry and Rolf approached, they found Adalbert defending the entrance against two masked attackers. Harry didn't hesitate. His wand slashed in the precise movement Katarina had drilled into him countless times, sending a cutting curse at the nearest Death Eater's wand arm. The spell connected with brutal efficiency, severing the limb at the elbow. The man's scream distracted his companion long enough for Adalbert to end the duel with a stunning spell that sent the second attacker crashing into the wall. Inside, Adalbert commanded, helping Harry support Rolf through the heavy doors. The secure chamber contained the remaining defenders, Marcus nursing a burned leg, two others with minor injuries. But no Katarina. Where is she? Harry demanded, helping Rolf to a treatment cot. Eastern wing collapsed entirely, Marcus reported grimly. She was directing evacuation when it went. Communication cut off. Harry felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The eastern wing, where the initial breach had occurred, was now likely nothing but rubble. I'm going back for her, he stated, already turning toward the door. Suicide, Adalbert grabbed his arm. That section is completely unstable. Even if she survived the collapse, I'm going, Harry repeated, pulling free. Seal the chamber behind me. Activate the evacuation port keys if I'm not back in 20 minutes. Before anyone could stop him, Harry slipped back through the doors, sealing them with a locking charm from the outside. The fortress around him groaned continuously now, dust filling the air as more sections gave way under magical and structural stress. Harry navigated the deteriorating corridors from memory, casting shield charms against falling debris as he moved toward the eastern wing. The sounds of battle had diminished, either the Death Eaters were retreating from the collapsing structure, or they'd been caught in their own destructive strategy. Where the eastern corridor had once connected to the central chamber, a wall of rubble now blocked passage. Harry cast detection spells, searching for magical signatures beyond the debris. There, faint but present, Katarina's distinctive magical resonance. Still alive, but fading. Reducto. Harry directed the spell carefully at the outer edges of the collapse, creating a small passage without triggering further cave-ins. He squeezed through the opening, climbing over broken stone and splintered timber. The scene beyond struck him like a physical blow. What had once been the eastern wing's main hall was now open to the alpine air, half the room and its outer wall completely gone. Through the gaping hole, the sheer mountain drop was visible, clouds floating beneath the fortress's precarious perch. Katarina lay pinned beneath a massive stone pillar near the room's center, blood pooling beneath her. Beside her stood a tall Death Eater, mask removed to reveal the aristocratic features of Lucius Malfoy. How appropriate, Malfoy was saying as Harry entered. Grindelwald's last lieutenant, buried in her mountain fortress. A fitting end to a failed revolution. History judges success differently than contemporaries, Katarina replied, voice strained but defiant. Your master, proved that. Malfoy raised his wand. Speaking of my master, he sends specific instructions regarding the boy. A pity you won't see, Expelliarmus. Harry's disarming spell caught Malfoy off guard, sending his wand flying across the ruined chamber. The Death Eater spun, face registering shock at Harry's appearance. Potter, he snarled, backing toward the wand. Come to die alongside your keeper. No one's dying today except maybe you, Harry replied coldly, advancing with his wand trained on Malfoy's chest. The Death Eater's eyes calculated rapidly, assessing his options. Without his wand, against a trained opponent with lethal intent, the math wasn't favorable. The Dark Lord will return, Malfoy stated, continuing to edge toward his wand. And when he does, no fortress or protector will save you. Yet you're the one retreating, Harry noted, keeping pace with Malfoy's movement. A rumble shook the remains of the chamber, sending more debris crashing down between them. Malfoy seized the opportunity, diving for his wand and snatching it up in a smooth motion. Avada, he began, but Harry was faster. Defindo. The cutting charm slashed across Malfoy's wand hand, severing fingers and rendering the killing curse incomplete. The Death Eater howled in pain, clutching his mutilated hand. Harry advanced, wand unwavering. Leave. Now. Before I decide to finish what you started. Malfoy's face contorted with hatred, but self-preservation won out. Clutching his bleeding hand, he staggered toward the ruined outer wall where a broom waited, his escape route planned in advance. This isn't over, Potter, he spat before mounting the broom one-handed and launching into the alpine air. Harry didn't waste time watching him depart. He rushed to Katarina's side, assessing the massive pillar pinning her to the floor. Foolish, she whispered, blood staining her lips. Should have, evacuated with the others. Not without you, Harry replied, casting diagnostic spells to assess her injuries. The results were grim, multiple internal injuries, spinal damage, magical drain from extended combat. Can't move the pillar, Katarina stated clinically, despite her condition. Counterbalanced, remove it, and the remaining structure collapses entirely. Harry knew she was right, his diagnostic spells showed the precarious equilibrium of the remaining structure. The pillar crushing her was also supporting what remained of the ceiling. Dumbledore will be here soon, he said, kneeling beside her. His magic could stabilize the structure while we extract you. Katarina's laugh turned into a cough that brought more blood. Planning my rescue, through Dumbledore. Ironic. Another violent shudder ran through the fortress. Time was running out. Go, Katarina ordered, her voice suddenly clear and commanding. Secure chamber has, evacuation port keys. Last one activates automatically, when structural integrity fails completely. I'm not leaving you, Harry insisted, attempting to ease her position without disturbing the pillar. Yes. You are. Katarina's blue eyes fixed on his with startling intensity. My part, is finished. Yours is just beginning. Katarina, listen, she interrupted. What I never told you, about your mother. Lily Potter was brilliant beyond measure. Her sacrifice, wasn't just love. It was the most advanced protective magic ever performed. Old magic. Blood magic. Harry stared at her, confused by this sudden revelation. Why tell me this now? Because you need to understand. Katarina's hand found his, gripping with surprising strength. Your power comes not just from training, but from her. From sacrifice and choice. Things Grindelwald's philosophy, undervalued. The fortress shuddered again, more violently this time. Cracks spread across the remaining walls like spider webs. Your path, Katarina continued urgently. Neither mine nor Dumbledore's. Neither dark nor light but, something new. Something yours. Harry felt tears burning in his eyes, an emotion he'd rarely permitted himself under Katarina's tutelage. I don't know how to do that, he admitted. How to find my own way. Yes, you do. Her grip tightened momentarily. You've been doing it, since you stepped onto platform 9 3/4. Trust yourself. Trust what you've learned, from all your teachers. The ceiling gave an ominous crack, fragments of stone raining down around them. Go, Katarina repeated. Now. My final lesson, knowing when to let go. Harry hesitated only a moment longer before leaning down to press his forehead briefly against hers, the closest thing to embrace their relationship had ever permitted. Thank you, he whispered, for everything you taught me. The good and the bad. A ghost of a smile touched Katarina's bloodied lips. Go make your own legend. Harry Potter. With a final glance back, Harry navigated through the crumbling chamber toward the passageway he'd created. Behind him, he heard Katarina whisper an incantation, her final spell, sealing the route behind him to prevent the collapse from spreading. He made it back to the secure chamber just as the fortress gave a massive shudder. The remaining defenders had activated their evacuation port keys, leaving only one remaining on the central table, glowing blue with urgency as the automated system detected imminent structural failure. Harry's hand closed around the port key just as the mountain fortress of Grindelwald's last followers collapsed entirely, decades of magical history disappearing into the alpine abyss. The port key's magic grabbed him, spinning him away from the destruction toward a predetermined safe location. As the world blurred around him, Harry felt something within himself solidify, not quite peace, but resolution. Katarina was gone, along with the fortress that had shaped his childhood. But her final lesson remained. His path. His choice. His legend to write. The port key deposited Harry in a small Swiss wizarding village at the base of the mountains. He stumbled as his feet touched ground, physically and magically exhausted from the battle and escape. Around him, the other survivors from the fortress huddled in a small group, their expressions shell-shocked. Rolf's shoulder had been bandaged, though the dark magic in the wound continued to resist treatment. Marcus and Adalbert stood slightly apart, deep in urgent conversation. "Henrik," Rolf called, spotting him. "Katarina?" Harry shook his head once, the simple gesture conveying everything necessary. A heavy silence fell over the group. "What now?" asked one of the younger followers, a witch barely out of her 20s who had joined their cause only a few years earlier. It was Adalbert who answered, his ancient face grave. "We scatter. The Death Eaters found us once, they can find us again. Separate locations, separate identities." "And him?" Marcus nodded toward Harry. "Our entire purpose is no longer relevant," Harry interrupted firmly. "I'm not your weapon or your symbol. Not anymore." The bluntness of his statement silenced them. For 10 years, these people had dedicated their lives to shaping him into Grindelwald's heir. Now he stood before them, rejecting that destiny entirely. Then what was it all for? Marcus demanded, anger breaking through his usual scholarly reserve. Katarina's sacrifice? Years of preparation? All wasted because you've been seduced by Dumbledore's soft ideology? Harry met his gaze steadily. It wasn't wasted. I learned, I grew, I developed capabilities I'll need. But the purpose of those capabilities is mine to decide now. Before Marcus could respond, a shift in the air announced magical arrival. Harry turned, wand raised defensively, to find Albus Dumbledore materializing at the edge of their group. The headmaster was alone but radiating quiet power that made further arrivals unnecessary. "Harry," Dumbledore nodded in greeting before surveying the battered survivors. "I see we arrived too late for the fortress itself. Kingsley and others are searching the ruins for survivors." "They won't find any," Harry replied quietly. "Katarina didn't make it out." Something like genuine regret crossed Dumbledore's face. "A formidable witch, regardless of our differences. Her loss diminishes our world." The simple acknowledgement, enemy recognizing enemy's worth, struck Harry as precisely the perspective Katarina herself had never quite achieved regarding Dumbledore. Adalbert stepped forward, wand not quite raised but ready. "What happens now, Dumbledore? Do you take him and arrest the rest of us?" "Arrest?" Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. "For what crime specifically?" "Political disagreement is not yet illegal, though some in the ministry might wish otherwise." "We took Harry Potter," Marcus stated flatly. "Raised him to oppose everything you stand for. And yet," Dumbledore observed mildly, "he stands here having rejected Voldemort's followers and their attempt to kill him. Actions speak louder than ideology, I find." He turned to Harry. "Unless, of course, you wish to press charges yourself." Harry understood the question beneath the question. Dumbledore was offering him the choice. Justice or mercy? Retribution or reconciliation? No, he decided. They did what they believed was right, however misguided. And without their training, I wouldn't have survived today. Relief visibly passed through the remaining followers, though Adalbert remained suspicious. "Your generosity is noted, Dumbledore. What do you want in return?" "Perhaps simply a ceasefire," the headmaster suggested. Your group pursues its philosophical interests without kidnapping any more prophesied children, and I refrain from mentioning your continued existence to various ministries who believe you all perished decades ago. The pragmatic offer surprised Harry. It acknowledged realities without demanding ideological surrender from either side. And Harry? Rolf asked, looking between them. Makes his own choice, Dumbledore replied simply. As he has already begun to do. All eyes turned to Harry, who found himself at the crossroads Katerina had predicted, neither dark nor light but something new, something his own. I'm returning to Hogwarts, he stated. As myself. Not as Henrik Strauss or Grindelwald's heir or even just the boy who lived. As Harry Potter, all of me, including everything I've learned from both sides. The declaration hung in the mountain air, simple but profound in its implications. Identity reclaimed but transformed. Heritage acknowledged but not definitive. Dumbledore nodded with quiet approval. A wise choice, though not an easy path. What about us? Marcus demanded. Without the fortress, without Katerina, without our purpose, find a new purpose, Harry suggested. Grindelwald's vision had merit in its recognition that magical society needs change. Work toward that change through means that honor individual choice rather than impose collective will. The advice, student instructing teachers, created a moment of stunned silence before Adalbert gave a short, surprised laugh. From the mouth of our own creation, wisdom we ourselves lacked, the old wizard mused. Perhaps there's poetry in that. Slowly, one by one, the survivors nodded, not in complete agreement, but in acknowledgement of the changing reality. Whatever came next for them would be different from what came before. I need to contact my friends, Harry said to Dumbledore. Let them know I'm safe. Miss Granger has been rather persistent in her concern, Dumbledore confirmed with a slight smile. She managed to track me down at the International Confederation meeting within minutes of your message arriving. Harry wasn't surprised. Hermione's intelligence and loyalty were constants he had come to rely on. As arrangements were made for departure, the survivors splitting into pairs for safety while establishing future contact protocols, Harry found himself standing slightly apart, watching these people who had been his entire world for so long prepare to scatter to the winds. Rolf approached him last, arm bandaged but standing straight despite his injury. I'm not good at goodbyes, the potions master said gruffly. Never have been. Then don't say goodbye, Harry suggested. Just, until next time. Rolf nodded, emotion briefly visible before being mastered. You'll need specialized training for your potions Newt eventually. When you do. He left the offer hanging. I'll know who to contact, Harry finished with a small smile. An awkward moment passed before Rolf did something unprecedented in their decade together. He extended his hand formally to Harry, not as teacher to student but as equal to equal. She would be proud, he said quietly as Harry clasped his hand. Not of what you're choosing, perhaps, but of how you're choosing it. With conviction, with strategy, with clear eyes. The simple truth of this assessment struck Harry deeply. Katerina had shaped him to be decisive, analytical, and independent, qualities that ultimately led him to reject the very path she had designed. Thank you, Harry said simply. For everything you taught me too. Minutes later, as he prepared to depart with Dumbledore, Harry took a final look at the scattered remnants of his childhood. The fortress was gone, Katerina was gone, and the path laid out for him had dissolved. All that remained was what he carried within, knowledge, skills, memories, and the freedom to use them according to his own conscience. Ready, Harry? Dumbledore asked quietly. Harry nodded once. Yes. I'm ready. King's Cross Station bustled with activity as students prepared to board the Hogwarts Express for the new school year. Among them walked a boy with unruly black hair, bright green eyes, and a lightning bolt scar visible on his forehead. Harry Potter had arrived, not in hiding, not in disguise, but as himself. The whispers spread instantly, rippling through the crowd like wind through grass. Fingers pointed, eyes widened, conversations halted mid-sentence as the boy who lived navigated platform 9 3/4 with calm confidence. Is that really him? Harry Potter. Where has he been all these years? Harry ignored the whispers, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. The summer had been a time of transition, living at a secure location under Dumbledore's protection, processing everything that had happened, and preparing for his public re-emergence. The official story, carefully crafted by the headmaster with Harry's input, acknowledged his kidnapping as a toddler and rescue at the end of his first year. Details remained deliberately vague, his captors described only as dark wizards, without reference to Grindelwald, his education attributed to private tutoring without specifying its nature. The truth remained known to only a handful: Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, and 2 people whose faces Harry spotted now moving purposefully through the crowd toward him. Harry! Hermione called, breaking into a run when their eyes met. She collided with him in a fierce hug that would have knocked over a less prepared recipient. Harry returned the embrace, still somewhat awkward with such open displays of affection but gradually adapting. "You're really doing it," she whispered. "You're really coming back as yourself." "Thanks to you," he replied quietly. "Your warning about the Death Eaters probably saved lives." Hermione pulled back, studying his face, the same features she'd known as Henrik, but somehow both more open and more complex now that the disguise had been discarded. "Bloody hell, it really is you," came Ron's voice as the redhead joined them, eyes wide with shock. "When Hermione told me Henrik was actually Harry Potter, I thought she'd gone mental." "Surprise?" Harry offered with a small, uncertain smile. Their correspondence over summer had prepared Ron for the truth, but seeing was clearly different from hearing. Ron shook his head in amazement. "My best mate is Harry Potter." "Wait till Fred and George find out." "They already know," Hermione pointed out. "Everyone does now." Indeed, the platform had become a sea of staring faces and pointing fingers. The attention made Harry's combat instincts prickle with discomfort, but he had anticipated this reaction. Better to weather it directly than live indefinitely in hiding. As they boarded the train, finding an empty compartment proved challenging. Students invented reasons to walk past, peering in with undisguised curiosity. Some braver ones attempted to join them until Hermione's increasingly pointed comments about privacy drove them away. "Is it going to be like this all year?" Ron wondered as the train pulled away from the station. "Probably," Harry acknowledged. "Until something more interesting happens." "Like what?" "You're Harry Potter, what could be more interesting than that?" Harry smiled slightly. "I'm sure we'll think of something." The conversation shifted to safer topics: summer activities, new textbooks, speculation about the year ahead. Harry participated while part of his mind remained vigilant, assessing potential threats and exit routes from habit. Some fortress training couldn't be unlearned overnight. When their compartment door slid open again, Harry tensed until he recognized Neville Longbottom's round face peering uncertainly inside. Hi," Neville said awkwardly. "Mind if I join you? Everywhere else is full." "Of course not," Hermione welcomed him warmly. Neville settled beside Ron, stealing glances at Harry with obvious confusion. "So, you're really Harry Potter? Not Henrik?" "Both, in a way," Harry replied truthfully. "Henrik was necessary for a while, but it's time to be Harry now." "Must be weird," Neville observed with surprising insight. "Having 2 names, 2 lives." Harry studied Neville with new awareness. According to information he'd gathered during his year as Henrik, the Longbottoms had suffered terribly during Voldemort's reign. Perhaps Neville understood more about duality and loss than his unassuming exterior suggested. "It is," Harry acknowledged. "But everyone has different sides to themselves. Mine just had separate names." The train journey continued with increasing comfort as their compartment became a sanctuary from the curiosity outside. Harry found himself relaxing incrementally, the hypervigilance of fortress life gradually giving way to something approaching normal teenage interaction. Until the compartment door slid open once more to reveal Draco Malfoy flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees instantly. Harry's hand moved to his wand, not drawing it but ensuring quick access if needed. His last encounter with the Malfoy family had ended with Lucius fleeing the collapsing fortress, hand mutilated by Harry's cutting charm. "Potter," Draco drawled, though his usual confidence seemed somewhat forced. "So the rumors are true. The famous Harry Potter was hiding among us as a transfer student." "Not hiding," Harry corrected calmly. "Observing." "Observing what, exactly?" Draco's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who could be trusted? Who couldn't? The usual things one needs to know when returning to a world where some people's parents tried to kill them as babies." The pointed reference to Death Eater parentage wasn't subtle. Draco's pale face flushed slightly as the implication registered. "Careful, Potter," he warned. "Some might take that as an accusation." "Some might take it as a statement of historical fact," Harry replied, maintaining his calm demeanor while remaining acutely aware of Crabbe and Goyle's positions and wand accessibility. The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Draco stepped back. "I suppose we'll see what the real Harry Potter is made of this year, won't we? Now that you're not hiding behind a fake name and accent." "I suppose we will," Harry agreed neutrally. After the Slytherins departed, Ron let out a low whistle. "Blimey, that was intense. You two were like circling wolves or something." "His father was among the Death Eaters who attacked this summer," Harry explained quietly. "He knows I know, and I know he knows." "That's complicated," Neville observed. "Welcome to my life," Harry replied with a small, grim smile. The remainder of the journey passed without significant incident, though Harry noted the increased scrutiny from prefects patrolling the corridors. News of his identity had clearly reached the staff, who were monitoring the situation closely. When they finally arrived at Hogsmeade Station, Hagrid's booming voice calling for first years carried a special warmth when his eyes found Harry on the platform. The half-giant gave him a distinct nod and what appeared to be a discreet thumbs-up. "Looks like Hagrid knew too," Ron observed. "Dumbledore would have told key staff," Hermione reasoned. "For security purposes." The carriage ride to the castle gave Harry his first glimpse of the Thestrals, skeletal, winged horses visible only to those who had witnessed death. Another reminder of how his experiences differed from his peers. As they approached Hogwarts, illuminated against the night sky exactly as it had been a year earlier, Harry felt a complex mixture of emotions. This castle had changed him, challenged his entire worldview, and ultimately offered him the first real home he'd ever known. Now he returned not as an infiltrator but as a student, albeit one with an extraordinary past and uncertain future. The Great Hall fell unnaturally silent as Harry entered alongside Ron and Hermione. Hundreds of eyes tracked his movement to the Gryffindor table, whispers rising and falling like waves. At the high table, Dumbledore watched with calm approval while other faculty members showed varying degrees of surprise or knowing acknowledgement. Only when the first years entered for their sorting did attention shift momentarily from Harry. He used the respite to center himself, applying occlumency techniques to manage the stress of such intense scrutiny. After the sorting and before the feast began, Dumbledore rose to his feet. The hall quieted instantly. "Before we enjoy our excellent feast, I have a few start-of-term announcements," the headmaster began. "First, to our new students, welcome. To our returning students, welcome back." His eyes briefly met Harry's across the hall. "As many of you have already noticed, we have among us this year a student whose name has long been known in our world, though his face has been absent. Mr. Harry Potter has returned to Hogwarts after circumstances beyond his control kept him hidden for many years." The hall erupted in excited whispers before Dumbledore raised a hand for silence. "I must ask that you extend to Mr. Potter the same courtesy and respect you would wish for yourselves. His story is his own to share or keep private as he chooses. Hogwarts has always been a home for those who need one, and never has that been more important than now." The simple statement, acknowledging Harry's presence without sensationalizing it, set the tone for how the school would approach the situation. Harry felt a surge of gratitude for Dumbledore's handling of the announcement. As the feast appeared and conversation resumed around him, Harry found himself bombarded with questions from Gryffindors who had known him as Henrik. He answered selectively, maintaining the official narrative while deflecting more intrusive inquiries. Were you really kidnapped as a baby? Who took you? How did Dumbledore find you? Can you remember anything about you-know-who? Through it all, Ron and Hermione flanked him protectively, intercepting the more inappropriate questions and creating conversational buffers when the intensity became overwhelming. Later, in the familiar comfort of Gryffindor Tower, Harry found a moment of relative peace by the common room fire. Most students had finally exhausted their immediate curiosity, retreating to dormitories to unpack and prepare for classes the following day. Hermione settled into the chair beside him, watching the flames with thoughtful eyes. You handled that remarkably well. Fortress training, Harry replied quietly. Emotional control under pressure was lesson 1. She studied him with that perceptive gaze that had seen through his Henrik persona from the beginning. Does it bother you? Using skills they taught you, even as you reject their ideology? The question cut to the heart of Harry's ongoing internal reconciliation. I'm keeping what's useful, discarding what isn't. The skills themselves aren't good or evil, only how they're applied. That's surprisingly balanced, Hermione observed. Most people would want to reject everything associated with their captors. Harry considered this. Katerina wasn't just a captor. She was complicated. She believed she was preparing me for greatness, in her own twisted way. He stared into the fire. Her final act was to save me, knowing it meant her own death. You don't owe her for that, Hermione said gently. No, Harry agreed. But I can acknowledge the complexity without excusing the wrong. She gave me tools I'll need for whatever comes next, even if she intended them for different purposes. And what does come next? Hermione asked. Now that you're publicly Harry Potter again? It was the question that had occupied much of Harry's thinking throughout the summer. Voldemort remained a threat, his wraith form had escaped the third-floor chamber, and his followers clearly maintained organization and purpose. Grindelwald's remaining loyalists had scattered but would eventually regroup, perhaps with new vision and direction. And Harry himself stood at the intersection of these forces, no longer a pawn but increasingly a player in his own right. I learn, he said finally. I grow stronger. I build connections based on truth rather than utility. And when Voldemort returns, and he will, I face him as myself, not as anyone's weapon or symbol. Hermione reached over to squeeze his hand briefly. Not alone, though. You know that, right? The simple declaration of solidarity, freely given, expecting nothing in return, still amazed Harry after years of conditional relationships at the fortress. I'm beginning to, he acknowledged with a small smile. As the common room emptied and the fire burned lower, Harry thought about Katerina's final words to him beneath the collapsing fortress, go make your own legend. Harry Potter. Not Henrik Strauss, Grindelwald's heir. Not the boy who lived, Dumbledore's prophesied savior. But Harry Potter, a person of his own making, shaped by both dark and light, choosing his own path forward. Tomorrow would bring classes, whispers, challenges, and opportunities. The road ahead would undoubtedly include confrontation with Voldemort, navigation of wizarding politics, and the ongoing process of defining his own identity and values. But tonight, watching the embers glow in the Gryffindor common room, Harry Potter was simply a student returning to Hogwarts, home at last, on his own terms. The fortress had made him a weapon. Hogwarts had made him a wizard. Now he would make himself into something new, something neither Grindelwald nor Voldemort, neither Katerina nor Dumbledore had fully anticipated. Something uniquely, authentically his own. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.